capital funding funds have been reviewed, and we anticipate those preliminary recommendations. Yes, they will be presented at today's council meeting. Affordable Housing Initiative funds, those are anticipated to be discussed in the coming months to help us inform those next steps. Mobile crisis funds that were allocated pretty early on, or they continue to be expended. Progress reports are as expected. That is the same for the tourism funding as well. Those continue to be expended, and progress reports are going well as well. Workforce development programs, those are two of those are currently in progress. The University of Iowa Labor Center program, as well as the 4Cs Childcare Workforce Development Program. Again, those are also, their first quarterly report is due April 10th, so I should have some pretty good details next quarter. And then there is a child care wage supplement program proposal, and I believe that's anticipated to be reviewed pretty soon. The final category, climate resilience funds. It sounds like those will be discussed here in a little bit, so I will leave that. And if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, council discussion.
I did have a question about just how we're pushing out some information. So it was really wonderful that Megan and I got to sit on the council committee for the capital grants for nonprofits, and it's kind of informed my thinking about how this next program, which I think was modeled kind of in the same way, I had for the underestimated communities support grants that we were formerly calling the BIPOC business support. So I had been in contact with a variety of folks over the last couple of years about that opportunity as it framed up, and we talked at work session and council about what that program might be and when it might be available. And then when the information came out last week, I pushed that to people who'd been in touch with me about it. And a couple of those people let me know that the only way that they'd heard about it had been from me. And so I just want to make sure that we have some kind of list or some way of like reaching out to people that we know we've been in touch with about the program. One recommendation that one of these individuals gave to me was to maybe have a like the COVID relief BIPOC business support grants, that we had a number of applications for those, and even if they didn't get funded, maybe we could reach out to everyone who applied for that or something. I think we also have lists of, like, I know you don't have to be a targeted small business for this, but maybe regionally, if we can sort those and make sure people know about it. So just making sure that it's reaching as many folks as possible.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We'll make sure and review how we push that out and that it's getting in the hands of the people we think would be interested. I will mention that we do have an open house for the public on April 6th. We're doing 2 on the 6th, 1 at noon and 1 at 6 p.m. And it's an opportunity for folks to come ask questions. If you do get questions, one thing to keep in mind is that for those small businesses that are looking for just a little bit of support, maybe a small grant for a sign or for technical assistance, this probably isn't the program. This is probably one step removed from that. So we're looking for partners that are going to create systems or frameworks to support those businesses, whether that's a capital, like a space in which people can do pop-up retail or commercial kitchen space, or on the flip side, an entity that's going to manage a grant program that may provide the individual grants to businesses. So just try to keep that distinction in mind. That's a tough thing to articulate because we know a lot of that need is at that very small business level, and we'll get there. We just are, again, one step removed at this time. But to your point, we will review how we're distributing that, and certainly in the next week ramp that up a little bit.
Hearing no more comments on this item.
Just thank you to city staff. It's been kind of a pleasure to watch like the ongoing and then what we've done since in the year plus I've been on here, like where we were with these programs a year and 2 months ago, like how far we've come even in a year. Work that started before we joined the council, Megan and I joined the council, but it's been so cool to watch all of these things watch those dominoes start to fall over and see these things go into action, and it's been really gratifying to watch that.
I might make one suggestion on the chart when we see it before, since we're getting some completed projects, just to have a section, a section just of monies already spent. All right, we'll go to the next item, number 2, which is Climate Action Division update. And welcome.
Thank you. It's a genuine pleasure to be here. I'm going to say, as I'm opening the slides, that this has just felt like a really great day to come before you and have this discussion. My day began this morning with our climate ambassador meeting among staff members, where they shared what they were doing within their divisions to work with us and independently to forward climate action in the city. And it was just a giant underline for me about the ways that many of the successes I'm going to talk to you about today are the result of having city staff who, across the board, are committed to moving climate action forward. And I just really, want to hold up my colleagues before I say anything else, to say that we couldn't do it without them. And you're going to see in the report all the amazing work that's being done. So if I can put it, is everybody able to see it as is? I'm not sure how I can close the bar. All right. Well, as you know, we adopted in Iowa City a climate action plan in 2018. And so this report was meant to capture a lot of the work that's been done in the period of time since then. That report includes our ambitious goals of reducing our emissions 45% by 2030 and achieving net zero emissions by 2050. Some of you may recall that in 2020, last year, we were talking about how we had achieved our 2030 goals 10 years early, which was very exciting. It turns out some of that is to be credited to the pandemic, so those emissions went up slightly when we looked at the 2021 data. But in this case, it's an instructive rise, I think. Taught us some important lessons about where those gains were made, and now hopefully we can recapture them, as I often say in the community, in a way that doesn't destabilize our economy. I think we all want that. The big overall trend line, though, is going down, and we expect fully that we'll recapture those 2030 goals still ahead of schedule, which is nice, and then we can really set our sights on the more difficult work ahead, which is to get to net zero by 2050. When we break out those emissions by sector, we begin to see some of the telling stories of where the rises were. In particular, if you look at energy use in industrial buildings, we can see as manufacturing activity ramped back up in 2021, of course, there was a rise in emissions associated with it. We also note the rise in emissions in transportation. That story is a little more nuanced, as we'll get to in some later slides. But really, the big takeaway when we look at the different sectors for emissions in Iowa City, and this is a through line every year right from the beginning. Buildings and energy are the largest source of emissions in Iowa City. And what we mean by that is the energy used to power the lighting and the heating and cooling and the electronic devices in front of all of us. The activity used to generate that energy results in the emissions associated with our building stock, and that's where the lion's share of our attention goes, because as you can see, as of the most recent inventory, it accounts for 78% of our total emissions. Now, when we break that down further and look at different sectors of the building stock, we can see that when we look at our residential emissions, they're not quite evenly divided between electricity use and fossil gas use. It tilts a little more heavily toward fossil gas, and for that reason, our interventions with the residential sector focus both on energy efficiency, so reducing energy usage overall, but also moving toward electrification. And the biggest mechanism we have right now to address that is the Residential Energy Efficiency and Electrification Grant. You received a memo, I believe, last month about the insulation program that's under this. We instituted that program last year. It really ramped up significantly in November following the launch of a integrated and comprehensive marketing campaign, so that most of that $80,000 that you see was actually spent at the tail end of the year. I'm quite pleased to report, I asked our analyst right before coming up here, had we surpassed that already? And indeed we had. So our spending in January, February, and March is already past the total spending for 2022 in that program, which is really exciting for us because, believe me, it is hard to get people excited about insulation. Some of the other ways we reach households here in Iowa City include the energy audits that our Green Iowa AmeriCorps team provides. One of the things that wasn't in this report, because it's an activity that's fairly recent, actually at the beginning of this month, we brought in a specialist who works with realtors on energy efficiency to do a training for area realtors. And it was very successful. She told us that normally when she meets with such groups in other areas, a big class is 7 to 8 participants. We had 36 realtors in the room, which was fantastic. Some of the other really positive feedback we got from her, she talked about the importance of having energy audits done in households. And when we said that this was offered for free to residents in Iowa City, she could not believe it and went on talking to the realtors about how in other cities, this is a service that would cost $400 to $700. And here in Iowa City, all you have to do is sign up and wait about a month, and we'll come and check out your home for you and perform some weatherization services. The other way we reach households is through our Neighborhood Energy Blitz, which is coming up here on April 22nd. For those of you familiar with the event, we go door to door in a targeted neighborhood delivering kits that contain energy-saving devices and information. In the afternoon, we circle back and collect used light bulbs and batteries for proper disposal. It's a very popular event. We get great feedback on every year. It's lots of fun to participate in. And if any of you would like to hang out with some of your constituents and go door to door delivering these kits, we certainly welcome you as volunteers on the morning of. You can talk to me about how to get signed up. The next area that we want to look at then in terms of our building stock is the commercial and industrial matching grant projects, which you all hopefully are already very familiar with. These, of course, are TIF-funded projects. And as you can see, the energy usage in our industrial sector is quite different from the residential sector. In the industrial sector, overwhelmingly, the energy usage is from electricity. And for that reason, these programs tend to be focused more on energy efficiency and then cleaning up that energy usage. So as you know, we've funded several solar arrays for area businesses through this program. We also do things like LED retrofits and window replacements. I know that my colleague Wendy Ford is going to be speaking to you later this evening about 2 other projects that have come under that program. But that's been a really valuable resource for commercial and industrial entities here in the city, hoping to improve their energy profile. And then finally, we have our climate action grant projects, which is how we reach nonprofits and other entities in the city that maybe don't fall as easily under the TIF-funded projects. Those are grants that are awarded in the amount of up to $10,000 a year for a variety of projects, as you can see listed here. And one of the things that's been really nice over the last couple of years is as that program has matured, originally we got a lot of applications for things like community gardens, or school gardening projects, and that's great. We want to support that work. But of course, as we know, the lion's share of our work needs to focus on buildings and energy usage. And as you can see, they are now starting to receive the lion's share of those grants, which is really nice. That's a step in the right direction. When we get to transportation, I had mentioned that this is a somewhat more nuanced section of our programming. Transportation is the second largest source of emissions here in Iowa City. It accounts for somewhere around 22% generally. As you can see, we do have some notable successes in Iowa City. Those of you who read the report will recall that Iowa City residents bike and walk at 5 to 7 times higher than national average. Our transit usage is also similarly high, and yet, overwhelmingly, the largest share of commutes in Iowa City are done by folks driving alone. So we still have work to do, even with those accolades. In particular, something that our department has been thinking about a lot is the impact of transit ridership from the pandemic, which we have seen a reduction of activity. We saw this in several other sectors. In transit, it hasn't quite recovered in the same way. The Climate Action Plan calls for us to double transit ridership in the city, and that was doubled as compared to 2018 numbers. As you can see, when you look at where we're at in 2022, now realistically what we're talking about is probably tripling it from where we're at presently. And so things that will come up for your consideration, such as free fares for buses, I think are important, considerations for how we might achieve those goals. Of course, in transit, we also have one of our biggest climate success stories, which is part of the nuance. Even though ridership is down, we have those amazing electric buses out on the street, which, as you know, are some of our best ambassadors for electric vehicles overall here in the city. Before I get into the buses, I do want to note that the buses we have 4 buses in our electric fleet, but we have approaching 16 electric vehicles overall. So there are a number of other electric vehicles already being utilized by city staff. And in fact, one of the projects I was working on today was reviewing bids that we received for the fleet transition plan we hope to put together that will chart a course to electrifying our entire fleet of vehicles. So hopefully, the next time I come before you, I'll be talking about something cool like our first electric fire truck purchase. But for the time being, we're really excited about those buses. Those of you who attended the Electric Bus Bash will know that one of my favorite things to talk about with electric buses is that electric vehicles actually were invented in Iowa. I don't think we talk about this enough. They were used as part of the NASA space program in the form of the lunar rovers. And now, of course, any resident in Iowa City, for free, if they get on the downtown shuttle, can hop on this technology themselves. So to me, it's just an amazing story of technology that was invented in Iowa, went to the moon, and has come back to help us save the planet. When we look at our other electrification efforts in the transportation sector, here too with electric vehicle charging, you can see the dip in the pandemic when we didn't have as many folks coming back downtown. That has rebounded robustly. We actually have stopped reporting in our newsletter on the new records set because we just keep setting them month after month, which is really exciting. And when we show residents the map of EV infrastructure available here already in Iowa City, they're often surprised to see how many chargers actually exist. We had an EV readiness plan that we worked on collaboratively with several other cities. One of the targets identified in that plan was to get 450 charge points per million population as an important tipping point toward EV adoption. Adjusted for our population size, we actually have the equivalent of 650 charge points here in the city, which means our public charging infrastructure is very robust and, in fact, beyond what we could hopefully target for, which really feels good because it means that we can really concentrate now on getting electric vehicle charging into the reach of renters, which is a bit of a passion project of my own. As you'll know from the report, in Iowa, we are going to have to start charging a tax on public charging. And so by getting out ahead of this, we hope to make this tax not something that's disproportionately borne by renters in our city, which, as we know, are more than half of the folks who live here. We also will have an exciting announcement coming forward in the near future about the first such project we'll be pursuing with the Condo Association. So that's a really exciting development for our office, which has been working very hard on that initiative. Waste, I'm only going to touch on lightly because, as you know, we have a wonderful resource management division that does a lot of work here in the city to increase both recycling and composting activities. I'll just say that we work very closely with that division, particularly in our education and outreach efforts. And in fact, Jane Wilch and I are going to be hosting our first live Speaking of event at Big Grove in October as part of our Earth Month celebrations. So these have been very popular virtual offerings. We're excited to be able to go back out into public now and engage folks directly with that issue. We're going to be talking about plastics. As I've been joking with Jane Wilch, it's good that we are doing that in a place where there will be beer within reach. It's a stressful topic. And then we'll land on adaptation, which is the last section of the Climate Action Plan. Adaptation is sometimes the most difficult part of our work to talk about because one of the things we know is that even with the great strides we're making, even with the great strides we expect to make, there are some impacts of climate change that we are already seeing now and that we will continue to see in the foreseeable future. These include things like high heat days and increased precipitation. We engaged in a carbon sequestration effort just a couple years ago that resulted in some very useful maps. The one you see in front of you is a map of the heat island effect here in Iowa City. The red areas correspond with areas that are between 10 to 13 degrees higher in temperature than the median temperature for that day. And the blue-green areas are areas that are 7 to 8 degrees cooler. When we switch ahead and look at the map that charts out our tree cover, not surprisingly, where the tree cover is where you see those cooling effects, right? And so that, I just think, really underscores the importance of our programs like Root for Trees that help residents plant trees, and it's actually also available to businesses, which we've been talking more about with businesses since a lot don't seem to know, and also the city's own tree planting efforts in right-of-ways to increase that canopy. Of course, there are some areas where tree canopy is not going to wholly address the issue. If you look back on that heat island map, you see a concentrated area in downtown. Some of our buildings, frankly, are just too tall to grow tree canopy over. And so when we looked at this data, one of the important takeaways for us was the importance of introducing support for white roofs or green roofs through our commercial activities. And that was rolled into then the TIF-funded projects that we're offering in downtown. It's a very cost-effective intervention. And then one of the other exciting projects we were able to launch in the last year was our Climate Resilience Corps. Through this program, we engaged with youth, in this particular instance with youth at City High. We brought in trainers to talk about climate impacts in our area, and also how to engage with neighbors, because one of the things we know in following an extreme weather event is that connections with your neighbors often make the difference in your safety and well-being. It was a really interesting project for those teens who went out and talked to their neighbors and heard about the impact of the derecho and the flooding and concerns their neighbors had. They went through a storytelling exercise to come up with their own definition of what it means to be resilient. They created a zine utilizing the things they had learned and things they had discussed, and they're actually this week packing kits to help increase home preparedness that they'll then be going back out to their neighborhoods now that the weather's nice and delivering. And they include things like a solar-powered phone charger, because one of the biggest things they heard from residents is that following the derecho, they had trouble charging their cell phones. Now, each of the homes contacted by the Climate Resilience Corps will have a solar-powered way of doing so in an emergency. And it's got Goldie on it, which I'll talk to you about in a minute. Like now. So one of our other big successes, of course, is the launch of our Climate Action mascot. As you've probably taken away from this progress report, we have many, many irons in the fire, many things to talk about related to climate action. And one of the challenges is really helping people distinguish between what is a climate action and what isn't. So we had a marketing study. One of the recommendations from the marketing study was to make use of a mascot as a way to sort of, in many ways, it's a branding exercise to signal that this is a climate action, but also to make climate actions approachable and friendly. As you know from the report you got on the Insulation Grant Program, when we applied Goldie to our outreach efforts to increase participation in the insulation program, participation went up 650%. So I often joke that Goldie also exists to keep me humble. Folks in this community do not want to hear about insulation from me. They want to hear about it from a cartoon bird, and that is fine. So in terms of looking ahead then, we've got several projects that are really exciting on the horizon. One that you're going to be hearing about in the weeks to come is a really great citizen science engagement project related to heat islands that we're super excited about in our department. We're also looking at better ways to engage our residents and businesses and organizations here in the community with opportunities under the Inflation Reduction Act. We actually have developed a checklist to help homeowners maximize their benefits. You know, one of the things we know from previous efforts in this area is that you can have the best funding in the world, but if people don't know about it or don't know how to utilize it, it's not going to achieve the effects that you are desiring. And so we have done some very strategic thinking about how we can help homeowners increase those benefits to themselves while also helping us achieve some of our climate action goals under those programs. As you know, we're also pursuing a solar array. Hopefully that'll be going up on the Public Works building later this year. And we're looking toward a Resilience Hub pilot project. We've been working very closely with members of the Climate Action Commission on what exactly this program would look like. Resilience Hubs are a little different from how we traditionally think of things like emergency shelters, in that they're really about engaging the community before a disaster happens, as well as during, providing some key services. And they're really just fascinating. So I would say that's a really fun project to keep your eyes on in the months ahead. Whew. Now I'm going to take a drink of water and
All right.
have you ask me some questions.
So thank you very much for that. Just wanted to flag, I see our UISG folks are here, and when we met with you guys before, one of the things we talked about was the program, the door-to-door, the Neighborhood Blitz program. So just want to make sure that, I know there were several members of your group who were very interested in that. So could you remind us what the date of that will be this year?
Yes, it's going to be April 22nd, and we'll have 2 volunteer shifts. One will happen in the morning to go out and deliver the kits, and one will happen in the afternoon to go back out and collect up those used light bulbs and batteries. So there's multiple opportunities depending on what your schedule allows.
Cool. They can access that online or call your office, or what's the best way?
We do have a website set up for it, and we have a handy redirect. I believe it's icgov.org/energyblitz. And if that doesn't work, you can reach out to me directly, and I'll get that information in their hands.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I really want to emphasize how much I appreciate, all the work that you guys have been doing since 2018, and really the thoughtful work that's gone into making sure that we have programming that really speaks to people. Apparently, a cartoon bird does that. Regardless, we got to get it done. I have a couple questions for you, and this is, I really want to be clear about this. This is not to diminish any of the work that you guys have done. You are absolutely working on the things that are most changeable in the now. But I'm also thinking a little bit about further in the future, and really just want to pick your brain on a couple things. I don't really know what the formal term for this stuff was called. I'm going to call it incidental emissions. So the kinds of emissions that occur as a result of, pipeline breakage in homes or outside of homes, or, the emissions that are created through the laying of concrete or the creation of concrete, industrial emissions, rather than just the energy used by sectors, the gas burned by sectors, the things that are, the emissions that are created as a result of processes. And so I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on the assessment of our carbon footprint in our community, because I glanced through the climate action plan and the stuff that we're looking at here today, and a lot of it does seem to be, again, rightly so, this is not a criticism at all, on the energy usage aspect of things. So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about, what we can do to assess where we are with those more incidental emissions in the future, when you think that type of action needs to start, just kind of a holistic picture.
Yeah, no, this is a wonderful question. We actually had a whole speaking of session focused specifically on greenhouse gas emission inventories for this reason. The greenhouse gas inventory that we focus on in this report and in most of our activities is our community-wide greenhouse gas inventory. We actually have 3 inventories that we do as a city. One is a municipal one that just looks specifically at city operations, and we have been doing those historically in about 5-year intervals. That's the smallest scale, the things that are directly under control of City Hall. And one of the most interesting things we learned from that is really only about 5% of our emissions are directly under the control of City Hall, which is why things like Goldie are so critical, because for 95% of those emissions, we have to engage voluntary actions within the community. The next biggest one we have is the community-wide one, which is the one addressed in this report. We also did a what's known as a consumption-based greenhouse gas inventory several years ago. Those are done less frequently, in part because they're very difficult to do. If you want to get into the technical terms, they really look at what you're talking about, which are Scope 3 emissions. The others look at Scope 1 and 2. That's more technical than any of us need to drill down into. But one of the things we learned from the consumption-based inventory is that if everybody on the planet consumed at the rate that Iowa City does, we would need 4 planets to support that consumption. And that includes things like the emissions that come off of concrete, for example, in our building sector. So we are mindful of them, and we do have some programming, particularly in collaboration with the Resource Management Division, to look at how we can cut down on those consumption-based emissions. I will say it is the toughest nut to crack. Like, as much as I joke about getting people excited about insulation, getting them excited about buying fewer things online, and even a steeper mountain to climb, right? But it's a thoughtful question, and I thank you very much for it.
I had a question about the that science project on heat island effect.
Oh,
Could you
yes, the citizen science
talk
one.
a little bit more about that?
See, this is where I'm going to get myself into trouble. This is what I can say, and Danny, you flag me when I say too much. This is Daniel Bissell, our energy analyst, who was crucial in obtaining the grant that's going to support that activity. Part of the reason I can't go into too much detail about it is that part of our agreement with the federal agency sponsoring that project is they get to send out the press release first. But it is a very exciting project. It's going to directly engage residents here in Iowa City to help us get some ground level data on the heat islands. The map that I showed you earlier is LIDAR data, which is taken aerially. So it's really great at capturing what's going on above the roof line in the city. The project that we'll be rolling out this summer through this grant will be getting street-level data just to give us a little more granularity. But also, I see it as more importantly, an engagement activity where we can get folks with their own hands on the data, right? So it's not us telling you about the data, it's citizens actually involved and residents in gathering that data and then deciding how the city's going to use it. That's cool.
I like that aspect of it. I mean, one reason I brought it up was learning that in Portland, and this was a ground level analysis during a heat wave. So when you combine heat island effect with a heat wave, the differences in temperature in Portland were 24 degrees, 99 degrees to 124 degrees. So when I heard that, I realized, I mean, that just as a story about heat island effect was shocking to me. I mean, when you're talking about 124 degree temperatures, you're talking about potentially fatalities. And so, yeah, heat island effect as a policy concept, I know I've been emphasizing it, but when I heard that, I realized this is a really very serious issue.
Absolutely. You know, and one of the other things we talk about a lot is that climate change is an amplifier of existing vulnerabilities. So when we think about the folks who would be most affected by that heat island effect, right, we're thinking about our unhoused population. We're thinking about folks who are perhaps transit dependent, so they have to stand and wait for transportation. I think it's something that is very near and dear to our hearts and our programming. It's great to have such wonderful support for it.
Do you know? Oh,
Go ahead, Mayor.
go right ahead.
Here we go? Okay.
Yeah.
Sarah, thank you so much for this presentation, and I really want to commend you on the formatting and way in which information was presented in this report. Having the individual stories with real humans and their personal experiences is really impactful and persuasive, so thank you for that. And thank you to your whole team and for elevating the other city staff who are collaborating with you. So I had a couple of questions and then maybe ideas or, again, not critical suggestions, but just ideas for maybe potential collaborations. You mentioned the marketing, or you mentioned the outreach to realtors. Is there a comparable program, or could there be with contractors and builders?
Actually, yes, we've been talking a lot about that as the next step.
Great. good. I mean, in my own experience, we replaced our furnace and our whole HVAC system in 2017, and it's natural gas. And I just, if the person suggesting the installation could have raised that opportunity, we would have made a different choice. So I appreciate that a lot. And I think just for the marketing part and Goldie, I think that's really instructive for a lot of things that we do in the city. And I'm looking at Jeff, but he's hiding behind that monitor. That there's a joke among people who do marketing and branding where they're like, well, marketing doesn't work on me. I know how it works. But marketing really does work, and it's really neat to see in a division that already has, I think, a very high level of understanding of communication and what might be effective to kind of take it to that next level. So I hope that we can, as you collaborate in other departments, like kind of pushing those same ideas and the way that you're doing outreach, and even just having the door-to-door elements of what you're doing. I mean, you're really reaching people in the community, having the youth group, having the climate ambassadors. So yes to all of those things, and I hope that they, that can act as a template and a model for other activities of the city and letting people know what we're doing and what's available as well. On the collaboration front, just wondering if you or your staff are working with Better Together 2030 at all?
We haven't directly collaborated with them. We are aware of the plan that was outlined and have flagged areas that we think overlap with some of the climate activities. So there's some nice possibilities there.
Yeah, I think that would be really great. I just came from a meeting in the I'm on the working group for the transit and connected community pillar of that organization, and it's a regional effort, but certainly we were just talking about ways to help get folks to adopt e-bikes for transportation, and it's like, oh, that's something we could talk with you about. So I think that Better Together connection might be fruitful quickly. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the counselors have said how much we appreciate your office and all that you're doing. And also, we have the Climate Action Commission that is doing a lot of work on this front as well. My question actually is related to the construction collaboration, or the collaboration with construction companies and such. But this is related to more of businesses that sell items, like Menards, Lowe's, Alexander, unless their name has changed. But is there any collaboration on maybe educating their staff when they're selling materials to people? Because I think Councilor Berg has just said, people might make a different choice if they were aware of, someone say, what is more, climate friendly?
Yeah, no, that's a wonderful suggestion. It's not an area that we've done much in to date, but that just means it's full of exciting possibilities.
Well, thanks for all that you've done so far. Yes.
And you all should know on the Goldie front that Jeff has volunteered to wear the costume if we ever develop it. So look forward to that. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Oh, any more questions from counselors?
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any more discussion on that item? And now, I'm not exactly sure. So discussion on the utilization of ARPA, SLRF, dollars for climate action report related projects?
Yeah, this is one that council requested to be on the agenda probably about 2 months ago, and we just felt because of the topics that were being discussed in front of it that it would be a good opportunity. So there's no staff presentation. There's just an opportunity for you to have that discussion. I will say just when we were making our ARPA plans in 2021, the thought at that time, and this you can access this on the memo on the first work session topic here. If you go to that summary page there, that would be in your 316 agenda under climate resiliency. Let's see. So it'd be page 8 of that information packet. We labeled it climate resiliency and hazard assessment planning. And we had some early conversations with the Flood Center at the University of Iowa about doing some in-depth modeling on our infrastructure and just trying to forecast what climate change could, what impacts it could have on our infrastructure. So an example that everybody could relate to would be stormwater systems, right? You've had a number of projects before you in the last couple of years where we're going back into neighborhoods and increasing the size of our stormwater infrastructure because we are experiencing heavier rains that are coming in quicker bursts than we have. So that was the thought process there. We haven't pursued that more. We certainly could, but we could also look at other ideas that you have.
Has the climate,
Oh, go ahead.
well, I was just going to ask, is there any knowledge that the Climate Commission has made any recommendations? Yes.
Yes, I brought their sheet of recommendations with me,
Awesome.
so I sat down too soon. The Climate Action Commission actually took up a discussion of ARPA fund use back in July of 2021, and the recommendations they made, this won't surprise you given the presentation you just saw, overwhelmingly focused on increasing our energy efficiency efforts. I would say that was prior to the launch of our energy efficiency grants, so that conversation probably is ripe for exploring again. We also had the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, which includes some significant incentives toward energy efficiency. So I think they might respond differently having that discussion now than they did more than 2 years ago. But they also do talk about things like scaling up our home rehabilitation program, increasing the energy efficiency offerings there, and in particular, applying it toward resilience planning. They suggested using it to fund grants for the resilience hubs that I had briefly touched on. So those were their chief recommendations, but I know that this is an ongoing conversation. And I will say I'm very happy to bring it to them again if you'd like renewed recommendations.
Thank you. The main reason I ask is because I know that our commissions, some of them are specializing in whatever umbrella they're, kind of under. And so I don't know, at least for me, when I, think about what are some of the projects that we can be working on, I personally would think that we would, kind of give that over to our commission and our staff to kind of maybe make some recommendations before, we start thinking about things, pulling them out of the sky.
I think one of the things that maybe I'll sort of piggyback on sort of the questions and possibilities component, and maybe that the commission and your department could think through, is that Laura and I had talked, and she had actually brought it up, I think couple of years ago, in fact, about e-bikes. And at one point, our transportation department, they were absolutely locked and loaded and were going to do it. And then the contract fell through, and then COVID. I discovered recently what Laura had been talking about with the possibility of an e-bike program and vouchers. And Denver has a really successful program. So I think that's where it's one idea, and it's one specific idea, but I very much agree with you. I am not an expert, and I would love to see what an updated, list of recommendations could be. But I would also maybe think that this could sort of be a nice stitching together of sort of the whole ecosystem, a whole community, and the possibility of how e-bikes might be able to work through climate action as well as helping with more accessible transportation. So it's a thought, an idea, Laura, if you want to, because I know you pursued it a little bit more.
Well, I think just in the last couple of years, I just read an article yesterday that said that cargo e-bike adoption is cargo e-bikes are selling better than any bikes have ever sold, and that the adoption of those is not by cyclists, it's by people who are using them for transportation. And as an e-bike rider who's not a cyclist but uses my bike for transportation, that resonated with me. And so that is what this working group also was talking about, and just thinking of ways to package and incentivize with collaborations potentially, through our several bike and e-bike retailers, as well as we even were talking about working with lenders to try and package, small loans that people could sort of see that car comparison and work through that. And also that the MPO has said 25% of people's budget or income is spent on transportation. And we know that people are really housing cost burdened. So if we shift some of that transportation cost down, those are the things that we were talking about in that working group. So that's where I see maybe collaboration if it feeds into what the commission wants to talk about.
I can say this is something that our staff has been looking at, particularly in light of the success of the program in Denver. We took a close look at it. We looked at our Root for Trees program, which has been successful here, and thought about, is this something we could pattern on to that model where we offer a 50% voucher for the community and 80% if you're income qualified. I will say one of the pinch points we did run into very quickly was that even when you're subsidizing an e-bike, let's say you're paying 50% of it, these bikes can cost $2,000. And so that's still $1,000 that someone has to pay, which puts it out of reach for a number of residents. So then we started saying, well, what if we paid for the entire thing? What would that program look like? And how do you apply an equity lens to this effectively? And I think we do have some exciting possibilities there in terms of maybe, again, going back to our transit-dependent population and seeing if we could fund e-bikes for them, which might do a number of things, right? Increase the use of this electric transportation while also increasing transportation options for the folks receiving those vouchers. I will note it would be a very expensive program, but, sometimes the best work is. So I appreciate your thoughts on that.
I think there are also, and I'm not that familiar with this, I just had a conversation with someone who has an e-bike, and it was a kit that was installed on his conventional bike. So there may be, less expensive options. I know I had brought this up during our strategic plan discussions. It didn't make the cut, but I do think the transportation piece, as we know with our buses, is a very visible expression of our climate action initiatives. Doing work on building energy, improving on energy efficiency in buildings doesn't really have other than through our own efforts to make it evident, doesn't have much presence. And so that's my sense of looking at transportation is it's important. I think it has potentially an equity component to it, and it would be, I think, a more visible indication that where we're going as a city.
Absolutely. I will say, I feel a little hesitant saying this, knowing your friend has one of the kits, but one of the difficulties we've seen with the aftermarket kits converting a conventional bike into an e-bike is that those are the e-bikes that have a tendency to catch on fire. So we're a little hesitant to embrace that particular technology, but I will say we discovered that through the very interesting conversations we've been having about forwarding e-bikes in the community. And at least one e-bike that we know we will be helping fund is a book bike for the library, which will be a cargo e-bike, which we looked at getting a kit for and then quickly decided to go in a different direction.
I think the possibility of e-bikes is amazing, and I see Councilor Burgess as the queen of e-bikes. See her on that, and she, no matter what the weather, she's out there on her e-bike, and I think that's a wonderful thing. But as you said, it's expensive. But for some time now, over the years, we've talked about a bike share program, and I know several things have fallen through on that, and that's kind of a less expensive bicycle option. But I don't know if Jeff or you know if we're any further on that, or if that's still going to maybe be a possibility for a less expensive means.
Yeah, we have taken a couple runs at that. Those, at least when we were investigating those in the past, we had not focused on e-bikes as much as just standard bikes. And then for a while there, scooters were the predominant mode being pushed out by the bike sharing companies. We have not revisited that in probably a couple of years, mostly because the same staff that would manage that were managing all the transit improvements and continue to manage some of the transit improvements, including free fare and Sunday service and late night service. So they're just kind of taking those one by one, but we could reprioritize if council wants to see a bike share. There is kind of a constant evolution within that industry. We've seen, over 10 years or so since they've been prevalent, the industry change quite a bit.
I do want to be clear in saying that any of the challenges we've identified, we don't think of those as deal breakers. We just think of those as things to think through as we develop a program like this, if that's a direction we want to go in.
I think one idea that I'm interested in exploring, Councillor Harmson and I were at a meeting at a mobile home park a number of weeks ago, and there was a man who expressed that he was really interested in having solar on his unit. For a lot of these people, they are, constant stable income, not increasing. I'm forgetting what the term for that is. But fixed income. Pardon me, or otherwise income insecure. And I really like to explore the option for public financing or granting for different solar projects for low-income families. I think that would hold a lot of water for working towards, our climate action, making sure that our low-income people who are interested in having solar panels, which also work to reduce their utility bills and affect their economic standing in the community. I think that's definitely something worth, at the very least, looking at. And I thank Rachel for sending me some information a few months ago about our specific programs that we have with insulation, which, again, you talked about today and is going very well.
To add on to that, on Facebook every now and then you see these pop-ups about get solar and it'll be virtually free. I don't know if you can speak to any of those, if it's what your experience has been, or
With Facebook ads? Or
I mean, one, he's asking if there's some programs out there.
We did have a program many of you might be familiar with. It was originally called Solarize Johnson County, then it became Grow Solar Johnson and Lynn, which sought to decrease the cost of putting solar energy onto homes. And I will say we were able to put solar panels on a number of homes. I can't say that they were all necessarily low income or moderate income homes, but it was also really a valuable learning experience. We talk about solar as being a source of free energy because the energy comes from the sun, but you still have the equipment costs associated with it. And what turned out to be a pinch point for many folks going through that program, we have actually the specific data on how many attended an information session, how many got a consultation for their home, and how many adopted. And you could see it funneling down with each of those levels, right? And one of the big determining factors is that with solar energy, essentially it's like a prepayment program for your energy needs, right? You make a large initial upfront investment, and then your energy usage goes down. Well, it doesn't really go down, but you get solar energy supplementing the energy you're getting off the grid. And so a lot of folks, when the proposition is, can you pay for the next 10 years of your electricity use in one check right now, that's a significant barrier. It would be for me and for any number of people. And so finding a program that helps reduce that cost ends up being critical, not just for lower moderate income households, but really for households across the board. At the same time, you have the consideration of utility scale solar. And I will say, whatever feelings may exist about utilities one way or the other, utility scale energy is the cheapest form of energy that's available to any household generally, and that's because of the economies of scale, right? When they build a solar array that can feed into the grid and provide clean energy for all of us, it's just cheaper than what we would pay for a small array on our own homes. And so I think, as you saw with so many things in the progress report, the answer is really an all of the above strategy rather than this or that. And certainly we continue to explore those options and look for ways to do that. And I know, as many of you will know, we did put solar arrays on top of two of the houses that were in the South District neighborhood as a way to explore funding mechanisms for that. And we continue to look for those solutions and learning opportunities to advance these kinds of efforts.
Mr. Mayor, if I may respond to your specific comment about those ads, those are generally for different solar leasing or renting programs. Basically, a company will come in, they'll install a solar array on top of your house, but they will still own it, and you're still required to pay payments to that company, which can escalate over time, rather than actually being able to reap the benefits of being able to plug straight into the grid, get credits. All of that stuff is taken by the company. Same thing with all of the rebates that you would get for energy efficiency from the federal and state government, or any local rebates that we might have. Those are all taken by the company. So they put a $16,000 roughly investment onto a solar array, let's say. And over time, 20, 30 years, you have to pay that back plus interest, and you get none of the benefits of actually owning independent home-based solar arrays, even though you have one. You might be paying less for your utility itself, but you still have to pay for the rental and leasing fees on those actual structures on top of your house. It's a very predatory industry sometimes.
Yeah, yeah.
Just to kind of switch topics just a little bit, and it's something you brought up earlier in your presentation, and since we're talking about funding, and ARPA funding was the thing, talking about the zero fare bus stuff. So it's kind of a question for whomever that can field that. Is ARPA a funding mechanism we can use to launch such a program? I realize it's not as sustainable because it's not a renewable source, but should that be part of our conversations as we consider the last part of our ARPA funding, or should we be thinking about other streams?
Well, it's certainly an eligible use and something we talked about in 2021 is helping us get over that hump. But the transit services have received some direct funding as well through other sources from the federal government. So we feel like we probably don't need ARPA to launch. We've got some launch money within the ARPA transit streams. That more difficult question will be how do we continue to sustain that funding once those launch dollars or those initial dollars are used. But I don't think we need to probably tap into the state and local relief dollars that Cassie talked about earlier for fare free.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you.
So just to kind of put a bow on that discussion, we were intentionally, staff was intentionally kind of holding off on the climate piece of the ARPA just to see how some of these bigger categories of funding played out. So you have the nonprofit capital grants, we have the underestimated business grants, and then our next bigger effort would be the affordable housing. We had $2.5 million slated for affordable housing. Just because 10%, 15% overage on any one of those categories could alter some of these smaller categories, we were holding off. Do you want us to move forward and either engage Climate Action Commission right now and ask for recommendations, or do you want us to stay the path and continue to work on some of the larger categories first? That's probably most critical for us to understand now.
Do we lose anything by asking them to start looking at recommendations?
No, I don't think you lose anything, but you might get into a situation, let's say, if the affordable housing opportunity that you really want to pursue is $3 million or $3.5 million, and we only have $2.5 million slotted for it, you may be in a situation where you have to go back to the commission or whoever's generating recommendations for you and say, sorry, we're actually not going to do what you asked. We're going to pursue this other opportunity.
I think what I was hearing is that there are also opportunities that we haven't fully explored in the Inflation Reduction Act. Is that fair?
Well, the Inflation Reduction Act, such an interesting piece of legislation, covers 134 programs. And one of the things that we've been doing in our office is combing through and figuring out which ones are directly applicable to the city. The majority of them aren't. They're direct funding opportunities for federal programs. There is some funding potential under a related piece of legislation, the ECGB funding, which the Climate Commission also took up and made a recommendation. There will be some future funding potentially available under the IRA The difficulty is there's still a lot of active rulemaking with it, and so we don't know exactly what all those programs look like or what the participation requirements will be. So I feel like this is a rambling maybe. I think there are some opportunities. I don't know how big they are or what they'll be.
Yes, where I was going with that is that it seems that maybe just having the commission continuing in their work in prioritizing projects that may require bigger chunks of funding, even if we don't know if it's going to be this, state and local relief bucket versus some other bucket or some other grant opportunity. I think just having that on the commission's radar is something that I think we want to hear about is kind of what I'm thinking.
Just go to the commission and ask them to dream big. I like it.
I mean, I think that's kind of the moment we're in. People agree. I don't know.
I just have a quick follow-up question on something that Councillor Burgess, or one of your responses to Councillor Burgess's question. Just, again, not super important, but a question about the rulemaking. Is that something that is affected by a divided Congress, or is that something that is happening through heads of executive departments?
No, it's really following the normal process for this kind of legislation where, the money gets set aside, and you're all very familiar with this on the city level. The money gets set aside, says we want to allocate X number of dollars for this kind of programming, right? And then it falls to the staff members, in this case, the federal staff members, to say, all right, well, how do we make sure that it's applied equitably, and what are the kinds of reporting requirements we're going to put on it, and how do we administrate a program like this? And so that's all of what's happening right now with a number of those programs. And we expect to get increasing guidance throughout the course of this year. If you ask me this question again next year, I'll probably have an even more rambling but more detailed answer.
Thank you. All right, so one of the questions is, do we want to direct the commission to kind of...
Wise is one with few desires.
I need, this watch is like horrible.
I guess one question I have is there a sense, you were talking about like the other big piece, the affordable housing piece, is there a sense that we'll have a clearer direction on that at some time? Like, for instance, if there was a sense we'd have a clear direction on that by summer, maybe we wait for that, and then in the middle of summer, then we kick it back to the Climate Commission and say, okay, we have a clearer idea of what your resources are going to be. Is there...
Well, I don't have that clear sense now. Part of where we need to start is just a conversation with you and say, here we have roughly $2.5 million set aside through these ARPA funds, but we also have fee and lieu funds collected in Riverfront Crossings. We have some TIF-generated affordable housing funds, and you have one of the larger items in your strategic plan is a Think Big affordable housing project. So we need to engage with you and say, what does that look like? Is that a grant program that's rolled out? Is that a public housing program? Is that going to involve land acquisition? So I feel like we need to kind of start at ground level zero with a discussion with you to kind of tease out that strategic plan priority a little bit, and then we can build from there.
Well, I think part of the reason I asked that is because my consideration of not just the financial end of things, but also the time of the commission members, right? And I don't want to have them, I don't want to spend that resource unwisely or without having a clear idea of what direction to give them. I don't know if that makes sense. But if we had like a better, I love that idea, right? These are people who have dedicated so much time and energy to it, and I want to make sure we honor the time and energy they dedicate to that work. So I'd hate to say, well, dream big, and then have to go back and say, well, thanks for that, but we're going to have you start over. If we could maybe avoid that sort of duplication, and that's kind of my thought. So maybe the way forward is to start jumping into some of that affordable housing stuff and some of that ground zero stuff. It's just my thought, like for future next few work sessions. I don't know. What does everybody else sort of think about that? But that's kind of what jumps out at me.
I think on the just a reminder for the ARPA state and local relief fund, we had only set aside $500,000 for climate action. That was our smallest category. So our budget with programs that we're doing now is roughly in that range. If you think of Root for Trees and the business grants and all the great things that Sarah just described, we're already operating at that level, so this would be kind of a one-time, I'm just generalizing here, doubling of those efforts, at least of the resources to support those efforts. So if we are going to ask to think big, we just have to make sure that we're thinking of the revenue sources that could support that, because you definitely don't want them to come back with $5, $6, $7 million projects and us to say, well, that's great, but we don't have any way to even contemplate funding those. So I would suggest one of two things. We either hold off, we let some things play out, that's the current path we're on, or if you're interested in getting a refresh of those ideas that the commission gave us during July of 21 when we were gathering some input, I don't think that's harmful as long as they know the general constraints. We're talking probably about $500,000. They've done that recently with the energy efficiency block grant that we'll be getting. They've already kind of started to prioritize how we would use those funds. So I think it kind of builds naturally on some of those discussions.
I like the what you had suggested, Sean, that I think that given that I think for all of us it was almost unanimous in terms of looking at affordable housing in our strategic plan, it was the think big. And so I think that let's let the plan help guide us in this conversation as well, especially given that while we're saying think big, it's almost with a small b, which is unfortunate. And so it is. It's about honoring time and commitment and energy and making sure that we can follow through on the recommendations. And at the same time, if we are looking at a larger bucket of money, for us to roll up our sleeves and start thinking about what that looks like in terms of affordable housing, because that's on us to do. So I agree with you. Long story, long explanation.
I would say I agree, except I also think it's important for us to visually see within our ARPA fund dollars that we have some climate action outline things. And so even though if we want to kind of hold off on it, I think if it's going to end up being, I believe we should allocate some funds. And if it's $500,000 that we're going to allocate, then I don't totally see the harm in asking the commission to go forth and just kind of base recommendations within $500,000.
Within that scale.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that it sort of put a focus on our affordable housing efforts, that we do need to move along on those. But it does seem with a $500,000 cap that having that discussion shouldn't be too time-consuming or a heavy lift for the commission.
And the affordable housing that initiative is at $2.5 million through the ARPA funds that we've kind of allocated or set aside.
I have a question because I don't remember where we landed in discussing the possibility of a centralized grant person who could be out looking for money and that kind of thing.
It's part of the FY24 budget recommendation. So as of July 1, we'd have the resources to hire that position.
Was that one that we were talking about delaying, though, or no? I'm thinking of something else.
I kind of cautioned that we may need to revisit that depending on property tax reform efforts at the state, but probably too soon to tell right now.
I just see that position maybe helping inform this kind of thing, because if we're asking the commission to think big and then it's like, well, there's federal money out there that maybe could be directed towards something even larger, and we then suddenly have the capacity to look for it or go for it, that's a different conversation.
Yep. And I think our staff, Daniel's been tracking the IRA stuff really well and continuing to look for opportunities and to collaborate with other departments. So we're doing that now, but we just don't have that sole position that's solely focused on that right now.
Thank you.
So what is the consensus?
I think what you said about yes, ask them to relook at that, but making sure they understand the scope we're talking about is not the big scope. It's the $500,000 or ish.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Because we don't really know, and we can tell them we don't know what that's going to be, but it'll be in. Right now, it looks like that range. That's what I'm hearing?
No, and I see heads nodding, so that's what we're going to go with. Okay. Awesome. Anything else on this item? We're going to move on to item number 4. Thank you so much for being a part of our discussion today. Item number 4 is determine city council representatives 1 or 2 for the ARPA Underestimated Business Grant Program Review Committee.
So no staff presentation on this, just recognizing that at your last 2 work sessions, you've had 2 different proposals, one from the school district and one from the wage supplement or wage enhancement team. Just thought you might want some space to discuss those work sessions. There's no urgency from a
We're
staff standpoint.
You
Prior
walked
item.
ahead of us.
Oh,
Jumped ahead.
oh,
So, yeah, this is
sorry,
the
jumped
ARPA.
ahead.
Yeah, no worries, but this is the ARPA Underestimated Business Grant Program Review Committee. So the last meeting, I know that I had threw my hand up and I wanted to be one of the representatives. And I guess at this time, is who else would like to be a representative? Anybody can. Okay. So are we thinking just one representative? Okay. All right, I will be the representative. We're on to item number 5, which is the discussion on the Iowa City Community School District preschool funding request and the Child Care Wage Enhancement Program.
Well, this is just kind of open discussion. I can give folks an update that I received today in this other committee meeting, but Katie Gerlach from Better Together was there and mentioned that yesterday and today there was, yesterday there was a meeting of the Child Care Coalition and representatives from the school district about the questions that we had raised of collaboration and kind of being informed by providers in the possibility of scoping the 4-year-old pre-K wraparound services that they were requesting funding for. So the takeaway that I got from that, as well as from our most recent work session relating to the wage enhancement and the questions of like, how do we pull this all together? What information is needed to kind of make sure we're not, I don't know, maybe moving too hastily. The takeaway that I got is that, the wage enhancement will help regardless, and the wraparound pre-K still has some pretty significant questions, and that maybe we let the coalition continue to work on that with the district and try and shape that up. So that's at least where I am based on that update, but yeah, I don't know where other folks might be at.
That's good to hear. That was actually going to be my question, because I know it's one of the things we had talked about during our last work session, last 2 work sessions, about having different groups coming together and letting the solutions bubble up from the people that are, in it up to their elbows, as opposed to us trying to figure it out from up here. And so that's great to hear. I think that would be, to me, that'd be great to hear sort of what more comes out of that. And I don't know if that's something for like maybe looking out a couple of work sessions down the road to sort of get, again, kind of let those that are closest engaged be working on that, and then, kind of let those solutions bubble up, and then we can take some action on it, because it'd be great to take some positive action on this issue. And I know that we're all sort of excited about doing that, but make sure that what we're doing makes sense for, creates solutions and not new problems.
I've had a couple of conversations as well, and actually was able to sort of productively go back to when we had COVID. I and a number of people in the community worked together to create these microhubs called neighborhood nests. And to a certain extent, they were useful. It helped students who needed certain resources be able to do their learning in a way that was best for them. But what I remember most afterwards, because there were many debriefings about what worked, what didn't, and we did a lot of change on the fly, was about the number of assumptions that we had, that we thought, surely this is going to be the right solution for the people who need it most. What we didn't do is actually talk to the people who needed it most. So I may sound a little blunt, but first of all, I'm incredibly glad that the Child Care Coalition and the school district are talking, because I think that there is boots on the ground work and in input that the coalition that has access to child care providers, to families who would be impacted across a range of different experiences. So this is really promising to me. I am not the type of person who says, it has to be perfect. I recognize that's the enemy of the good. But I think given the kind of investment and such promise that is in this program, and such, frankly, a necessity to help equip families and the community and these kiddos to put their best foot forward, I would really like to see some answers and some solutioning done in advance of us doing an up or down vote. I would love, I know that when they were here, and as well at joint entities, we were told that there were surveys, and we found out the number of kiddos that were not currently getting childcare. I would love to find out from those families, well, why is that, right? And not as a genuine question, because there's a number of reasons why they may not. It might be that it's family oriented. It might be that it's, that there's a cultural gap between what does childcare mean as we're thinking of it versus how, different families might understand it, and what are the educational components that are going into it. So these are questions that have kind of bubbled up, and is everything going to get answered? No, but I do think that these are things that, going back to my best of intentions and helping out the people that I thought needed the most help through Nests, there are a lot of assumptions, and we would have done a lot better to reach out to the people who have boots on the ground and to the people who are directly impacted to say, well, what is it that you need, and why aren't you getting it? And so I would like the school district to pursue that line of thinking a little bit with a few more partners. And then I would feel that much more confident. This is a tremendous program, and I think it has so much potential. I'm just not quite there yet in terms of feeling like it's got the buy-in and some of the data that it needs for me to feel as confident going forward, at least right now.
I would say just my own separate comment here. I still have a little bit of concern with the aspect that we would be prioritizing and starting the program with large child care providers before.
I'm talking about the school district, not the wage enhancement.
I know.
Oh, okay.
Since the item is for both. I'm not directly
Right, okay.
contrasting your comments. Apologies for not clarifying. So just on the general topic of the program, I am a little bit concerned, again, clarity, going to the wage enhancement program here is what my comments are about. A little bit concerned about the prioritizing of larger companies that have more resources and kind of just setting aside small families, operations, either out of homes or their own independent facilities. It's a concern. I don't know how to solve that problem, but again, I'm someone who has a little bit of a personal experience with this. My parents being in-home child care providers for the bulk of my youth. Something like this is going to have a huge impact on those families, and some of those families are going to be having child care facilities in their homes for very particular reasons. Maybe they can't leave their home. Maybe that's the extent of their abilities. I mean, we're going to be seeing certainly people that have, questions about documentation. So we're looking at impacts to the immigrant community here and their streams of income. So I'd like to see something about that, either a better justification, in my opinion, as to why we would specifically exclude those people rather than work to bring them into the process and make sure that they can provide the documentation and other things that are necessary, rather than just, in my opinion, centralize public dollars in, companies that already seem to be doing all right. So
I'm
that'd be my
pushing back a
general-
little bit. Larger companies in terms of childcare?
Yeah. I'm just saying, like, more established. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, I mean, because most childcare places are, A, there are many, many independent facilities, and B, we're talking about staff of 20.
Sure.
So I'm not sure, I was just like,
Yeah.
I just want to clarify a little bit.
Absolutely. But what I'm comparing is, my parents' operation was a staff of like 3 or 4, right? And we took care of 20 or 30 kids with that. So I'm just wanting some more answers in that regard. Not necessarily saying that I would vote no, but it gets me a little bit uncomfortable. So just looking for more information in that regard. And again, nobody's making boatloads of money in the childcare business. I don't want it to be said like that. But I still want to make sure that when we are allocating these dollars, the allocations are equitable and encompassing the vast, multitude of situations that we have with childcare providers in the community.
I appreciate your question, Councillor Dunn, because I believe I raised that question to the group that presented as far as had they surveyed in-home care providers, and I'm talking just a mom and pop sort of organization that maybe has 5 or 6 children, and they hadn't yet, but it sounds like they had plans to try to seek these people out, because I know of some that they just can't afford to take children that parents have child care assistance. So those are concerns, but I agree that you don't want to pit them against these established businesses that even if they only have 20 employees, we would
those are the
consider
large
them
ones.
right. So
Just, I was saying for scale.
Right,
essentially.
exactly,
20 people
exactly, but I can
staff
understand your
is
concern about that,
what constitutes
so,
a large
right.
company. I think I know the 5 people who are listening, to talk about, a large company of childcare, it's like, that's what we're talking about.
Absolutely.
Not necessarily
Absolutely.
like, 300 or anything.
100%.
But totally, your point is well taken.
And I appreciate your
Both of you.
clarification. Of course. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think what we heard at that last meeting was, they had to start somewhere, and that I actually heard it as the wanting to get logistical things figured out and get the kinks ironed out, and then address those that are maybe going to have a few more challenges based exactly on the things that you were talking about. I mean, one thing I know, I have some clients who are childcare providers, is they don't have a wage. Right? The way their business is structured is they pay themselves as sole proprietors or as distributions, through an LLC or something like that. So it can't actually be delivered in the same way for all of those folks either. So I think that's what I heard at our last work session. But I think we'll just keep engaging them and make sure they know that that's a priority of ours as well.
And I certainly appreciate your comments, and I don't really think that there is a better course of action.
Okay.
Rather than to just let them know, hey, we don't want a large-scale transition away necessarily from these smaller, operations. Again, taking into account the scale of the operations, we want to make sure that people are treated equitably with this program. That's the biggest focus.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, hearing no other comments, we'll go to clarification of agenda items.
You have to remind me, is this where we talk about if we want something pulled out from the consent? From formal, yes.
Yep.
I actually would, it's on, I believe it's, sorry, once we get past the cigarette stuff. The 7A on the rezoning of JJR Davis. That would be something that I would like to talk about during formal.
Just so we're clear,
Is that
the
correct,
item
or-
today is just setting the public hearing
Oh, okay.
for next time. I'm sure,
Sorry.
that's fine.
Thank you.
Sure
These
thing.
are this is why I pull it out and ask the question.
Yes.
and then-
That's what this is for.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, never mind.
So then we'll talk about that on April 4th will be the
Okay, perfect.
public hearing.
Sounds good.
The clarification, I guess, on that item. Will the correspondence that we receive when this actually becomes a council vote issue in the preceding meetings, will the messages from Jane, Janet, and the rest of the Danes be included in packets future?
I'm looking at Kelly because she is actually the guardian of such things.
Typically, no, because they are in this packet and you'll accept them in this packet. And any new correspondence would be in when we hold the public hearing.
Would you like to see anything different?
I would like, at the very least, for Jane's It's a 4-page letter to be included when we actually are doing our deliberations, if people would be okay with that.
I think if we accept one correspondence, we would do all.
And I think that was that was within the P and Z commission packet.
But it was also attached to
It
this
was
one.
attached.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So if, I would say all correspondence.
Sure.
Are people okay with that?
Yes.
So if you can just make all correspondence. And that would include any late for this one as well?
Sure.
This
Okay.
is just for this one item?
Yes.
Just for this one item is the request. Anything else with this agenda? All right, we're going to move on to information packet March 9th. Information packet, March 16th, and we went through a lot of that.
Well, just to start off on that, under pending work sessions, there were a couple I would like to ask council to consider for future work session. One would be the Orchard Subdistrict. When we had that on our formal agenda and had our vote, there was, Jeff mentioned, staff would be interested in council direction. So it seems that the first step toward trying to establish what that direction would be to have a work session to discuss it. So that's.
Wasn't your sense of wanting direction, this is just purely because I don't know, based on the discussion and the vote for the Orchard Subdistrict, was it about looking back at the district plan, or was it about about zoning?
Yeah, it could be either. That's one of the questions
So I guess
staff
that's what
has.
I'm-
Is there?
I'm curious what you're
I'm
looking
envisioning
at.
it would be both.
Okay.
A larger conversation, yeah.
Yeah, is the vision for the area flawed, or is our components of the zoning code flawed that need to be changed? That's kind of the question.
I would be okay with that, doing a work session on that.
I have no strong opinion on timing, but I do think we do need to give city staff a clearer direction,
Yeah.
Definitely.
Agreed.
We had the vote a while back. I mean, I personally would like to see, it doesn't have to be immediately, but certainly some put it on the radar that it's important that we have it. And then the second one has to do with the Rochester Avenue natural area. That's something that, a few of us have been working on since August of last year. And I would like to have a discussion of the full council over that one. So I just wanted to raise that as another potential work session item.
I'm not sure I know what that is. What's the Rochester Avenue natural area?
Well, the Rochester Reconstruction Project
Okay.
entails an area with it's a natural area along the south side of Rochester Street.
Where we didn't put the sidewalk, where we changed the
Right, it's
plan
sort
to
of
not,
that, yes, on the south side of the street, a little bit east of Rochester Court, I think it is. If I'm not mistaken, east, and I don't recall the actual linear footage. And it's been, there's some concerns among the neighbors as to what was being proposed there. And, three counselors over the last numerous months have been engaging with staff and the neighbors to try to understand what, if anything, we could do in that area. In part, the concern was a retaining wall of variable height that was going to be going in there. And, that what can we do to try to reduce, the height and scope of that wall? And so there was, again, it's been an ongoing conversation, and at this point, I just felt it was something that I would like to have the whole council to be part of.
Is that wall in the right-of-way? Or is this on private property?
It's in the right.
It's in the right-of-way.
Okay.
It's not proposed, it's in the approved
Right.
project.
It's in
underway.
it's the engineered plan for the retaining wall in our right-of-way. Yeah. I don't feel like that warrants our additional attention. I feel like we've kind of vetted that through and approved the plan. I trust our engineers. I think it can continue forward.
So, yeah, I think of this, so the question is there, council support for the work session? And so I heard Councilor Taylor say yes. I would personally like to have more discussions outside before bringing it to council with Councilor Thomas personally, but if there's another third person, all right, so we'll put it on the work session agenda for the future, and we'll go from there.
Is this going to potentially hold up? I mean, because I know that construction is happening essentially now. Isn't that going to hold up?
We can certainly put it on the next agenda, on our next work session.
To what end? I mean, what are we going to be talking about?
Well, we can't discuss that here. I mean, it is a work session agenda item that has been put on the agenda, on the work session agenda, and so it'll be, we have to prioritize things based on a lot of factors, and so maybe you're wondering what is the content so that you can figure out how to respond.
Correct.
Yep. So what I might suggest is maybe connected with the person who recommended this work session item to have a conversation with you. But we're going to move on to the next item. Anything else with March 16th?
I mean, I think that we should definitely call out the memo from Director of Parks and Rec, since we have the consultant selection process out there. And I appreciated that, given that this has a lot of public interest, I appreciated that this was put forward with a lot of detail. I also have been reading emails from concerned citizens about the process, and I think that having read the letter, and I apologize because I cannot remember your last name or how to pronounce it, but Amy, who is a staunch advocate of the city park pool. I read your letter, I read it through thoroughly, and I read it sort of side by side along with what the proposal is, and I feel that many of your concerns are addressed within this this memo and also the consultant process, including and especially the fact that whomever wins this will have be a SME in engineering as well as in development and design. So I just wanted to call that out because I know that you're not the only one. There is an advocacy group who is really, really interested and does not want us to forget, and we have not. And we said when we approved the master plan that there would be follow-ups and a very transparent process. And I just want to say that this is one very big step in that. It's multiple pages of step-by-step of here's what we're going to look at, here's how this is going to happen, here's how we'll get feedback. And just one point is that there was a question about, well, why would we look for input from people who don't use the pool? And it's actually precisely to make sure that we are more inclusive, because we have found from the blast process that there are people who don't feel that the pool is currently set up for them, whether it's through ADA accommodations or from it being accessible to them out of comfort and or the types of things that they want to see. So I just wanted to answer that particular question. I don't know if you're listening. I will be responding in email, but I just think kudos to staff and to everyone who put this memo together and the process itself. It's very detailed, it's intricate, but it's also very clear, and I appreciate that.
Jeff, quick question about this one. When will we be tasked with approving this RFQ?
You typically, this is very rare that we come to you with an RFQ or an RFP. That's typically a staff function. And then you would approve the hiring of the consultant. So what you see here is basically our advertising to the consulting world to say, if you're interested in this project and would like to provide these services, here's how we anticipate this going. And then Eric's office will work with Parks and Rec and Engineering to actually develop an agreement with the selected consultant that you would consider in a public session. 3-4 months would probably be ideal when that would come back to you.
So I guess I would echo a lot of the comments that Councillor Alter had, but I've also had a number of meetings with the folks that are advocating for the pools, and I think that there's a pretty, and tell me if I'm wrong, advocates for the pools, friends of RAL and friends of City Park Pool, I think that what they're asking for at this point is two things. One, for the original design of City Park Pool to be included as part of the focus group, which as of present, I don't believe it is. And two, for city, so basically no change be an option for the focus group. And two, for employees of the city or their family members to be excluded from the focus groups. I think at the very least, including the no design change in the focus group is a pretty reasonable request, especially given how many people have been engaged on this topic. They have a petition of 900 people. That's no small feat. And I don't think it's particularly a difficult change either. So I would personally be in favor of making sure that we have those changes if council would feel interested.
I would have to be reminded on this, and I can totally see where you are on the no design change, but there has to be some changes, right? Because it's not ADA compliant, because the pool is 70 years old, right?
Yes, of course. Taking that into
just
account.
making sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Taking that into account.
There has
but
to be
like,
a zero entry,
yes.
which does.
Yes, complying with federal regulations, state regulations, all of that, but otherwise making that part of the focus group process, and then excluding, anyone who works for the city or their family members from being part of that focus group, so that we're just focusing on that. That I think is part of a discussion, because I think there might be reasons for that. Would love to hear.
So I don't know if our attorney has anything to say about that, but I would, well, I'll let you respond and then I'll give my 2 cents.
Well, yeah, I'm hesitant about the excluding all city employees. When I was reading, and I have not read all of the communications that we've received from the advocates for the 2 pools and so forth, I understood their criticism to be that the city staff was overweighted in the focus groups and so forth, and thus felt like the results were skewed. I presumed with the notion that all city staff would be of one mind, and I, for one, am not certain that that's accurate. So I think that taking the additional step to say not only that we will ensure that city staff is not overrepresented, but that we have no city staff involved might be going pretty far.
Is there a comfortable middle ground that people would feel good about?
So I just wanted to clarify, because the way that I read the RFP, the focus groups are only if we decide that the pool needs to be redesigned. And that's why the focus groups are about redesign. So if we say, if we want the pool to remain the same, that's the repair option. And we don't get to the focus group stage unless and until we've already decided we're not going to stick with the current pool. So I just think procedurally that is taken care of in how the steps are in order.
Well, the way I read this, and Amy's comments to us recently, is there, yes, there is the idea of can the existing pool be repaired? And if it can be, and the council agrees to take that approach, that sort of stops the sequence. Amy was also talking to the thought that, let's say it can't be repaired. What she was suggesting was one of the three schematic designs would be essentially leaving the pool as is. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify
Yes.
that. That's what Andrew was referring to. And I do think that makes sense. I think it's important for me, at least for me, to explain what I'm thinking when I say that, because the way I had put it, that it shall include one scheme that essentially preserves the existing pool footprint. I think we all. I certainly would not want to say it has to be precisely the same footprint of what is there. Second of all, I would say, preserving the existing pool footprint as a foundation for the consideration of additional features. Because in my view, I'm sure there are pools of that type that over the years have seen additional features included in the project. So, at least that's my position, is I think it's important to have the footprint of the pool be one of the schematic design options. But I'm not viewing that as something where we just simply do no changes whatsoever, with regard to any special features that could be included.
We'll have to wait and see whoever wins the thing to find out.
What? I mean, I do think that seems like especially given the history on this project, where there is a lot of interest in just keep it the way it is. And that's one of the options, not the only option, but it would be one of the options to be considered.
So if we decide not to repair the pool but to renovate, couldn't the consultants come back within the parameters that are in the RFP? Couldn't one of the designs be to keep it as it is but still replaced? Like that's not excluded.
It's not
from-
excluded.
No, I think it's just to be clear up front.
That one of them should be.
Yeah, I feel uncomfortable dictating to experts who we're hiring to come in and consider all of the other factors, right? I absolutely agree. There's been a lot of interest expressed to us in, that it should remain this way. I think their job will be to take that into account in, the work that we've done so far and how that's been expressed and everything that's, collected in the feedback and all of that we have. And if that, along with every other factor about the pool that at that point we've already decided needs to be renovated, if that makes sense, that will be an option. I mean, that's kind of what I feel uncomfortable limiting what a consultant could come back with in that particular way, just because I think that's their job.
Well, it's not limiting them. It's just saying of the alternatives, there would be one alternative that essentially used the existing footprint of the pool as a starting point.
Well, and I think I hear what Councilor Burgess is saying is anybody we hire is going to be privy to all of these discussions, and they couldn't possibly ignore the fact that there's been an ongoing coming up with some of these design plans. So I think, and please correct me if I'm putting the wrong words in your mouth, it's a self-solving problem, self-correcting, in that if it makes sense, that'll be there. Is that,
I guess also what I'm worried about is if there are, we're looking for an expert to tell us how this pool could be renovated. It can't be repaired. It has to be renovated. We're asking them to give us 3 designs of how that could be. If we say it has to, one of those 3 designs has to be this way, are we eliminating or are we cutting ourselves short from opportunities? Like, if we're paying them for like their expertise and we say, one of the 3 has to be this, it just seems like we might be foreclosing. Whereas if the, at that point, the focus groups will absolutely include, the input that we've been hearing as well, right? Because the focus groups only happen at that point.
I don't know. It makes me uncomfortable to say
And there
that.
are some details in here. I know that we have to end, but I know that there are details that say things like keep the mature trees and, that there's like working constraints that actually are talking about keeping that essential, some of it, that essential.
So
footprint.
we will take a recess from the work session and come back to this, but before we do that, I want to bring up USG on item number 8 for their update.
And Mayor, while they're coming up, let me just supplement the record. Amy Kretkowski, there's been a number of comments about Amy. I just want to make sure the record reflects who we're talking about.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, Council. I hope you're all having a good day. So just have a couple announcement here. First off, spring break just ended, so students are back and finishing up the last half of the semester, and the undergraduate student government is currently in its election phase, and we plan to know the next year's administration early April.
Yeah, and so in some lighter news, obviously, I wanted to throw in this before the next one. Men's basketball team didn't pass the first round of playoffs, but the women's team has made it to the Sweet 16, so we were cheering them on. Exactly. And then in lesser news, not as happy news, the current Iowa legislature has passed a ban of university funds to DI initiatives and creating new ones. And so the Board of Regents has recently started reviewing current DI programs. We're currently working on how USG is going to tackle this, and so we'll give you updates as that goes on.
To add on, it hasn't been passed yet. It's in the, it's currently in the phase.
Passed.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to recess until after our formal meeting. We'll come back to the work session.
progress.
It is 6 p.m. on March 21st, 2023, and I'm going to call the Iowa City City Council meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Alter.
Here.
Burgess.
Here.
Dunn.
Here.
Harmson.
Here.
Taylor.
Here.
Teague.
Here.
Thomas.
Here.
All right. Well, welcome to your City Hall, to everyone that's here in the audience, and to those online, welcome as well. Our first item is proclamations, item 2. 2A, Gender Day of Visibility. Whereas there is no doubt that the transgender community continues to face discrimination here in Iowa and worldwide. Be it in the workplace, schools, or society, there is an immense harassment and inequality. And whereas Rachel Crandall, a transgender activist, founded this day in 2009 to raise awareness for the incredible burden of discrimination the community faces in every setting imaginable. And whereas the need to bring a day of visibility for the transgender community is indicative of the oppression they face in many sectors of life, Crandall wanted to highlight the fact that the only transgender-centric day that is internationally recognized as Transgender Day of Remembrance, which is in mourning of members of the community who had lost their lives, and there was no day to pay homage to living transgender people. And whereas in the past year, hundreds of anti-transgender bills in states were proposed across America, including here in Iowa, most of them targeting transgender youth. The onslaught has continued this year. These bills are wrong. Efforts to criminalize supportive medical care for transgender kids, to ban transgender children from playing sports, and to outlaw discussing LGBTQI plus people in schools undermines their humanity and corrode our nation's values. And whereas on Transgender Day of Visibility on March 31st annually, we recognize and revere their contributions, successes, and relentless resilience in standing tall and strong in the face of injustice. Now, therefore, I, Bruce Teague, Mayor of Iowa City, do hereby proclaim March 31st, 2023, to be Transgender Day of Visibility in Iowa City, and call upon all to join us in lifting up the lives and voices of transgender people throughout our community, state, and nation, and for us all to work toward eliminating discrimination against all transgender, gender nonconforming, and non-binary people. And to accept this proclamation, we have two individuals that will come forth. On behalf of the Iowa City Pride, Mark Stone will be accepting. And then from United Action for Youth, it will be Harry Winter Epstein. Great. In that order. Welcome, and please come and say a few words. And I'll give you both this proclamation.
Thank you. My name is Luckett Kiche. I mix Luckett Kiche. I teach at Grantwood Elementary here in Iowa City, teach 6th grade, and I am among so many young queer kids and transgender children in my classroom. And visibility is incredibly important for us, and this day is also important as well. I want to make sure that as individuals, you're pushing for not just tolerance of trans individuals, but acceptance and support and inclusivity, because it's crucial, especially at these times, even more to support our children, because they're all we have. I just want you to recognize also that a lot of the time when transgender people are murdered, they will often be dead named, and they will often be misgendered and forgotten, as we have noticed for many, many years. And individuals of color are more likely to face those threats. Trans women of color are at the top of murders in our nation right now, and they've always have been. And I just want you to recognize that there's no one way to be trans, and we are here and we are experiencing total, craziness in our lives, and everything is chaotic. And I don't know whether I'll be able to teach pronouns to my kids, things that are just normal. So thank you for having this day, and thank you for having me and us, and on behalf of Iowa City Pride and Iowa City and all the kids in my heart that I've taught and haven't taught yet, we appreciate you.
Thank you.
Hi there. I've never done this before, so please bear with me. As our mayor said, my name is Harry Winter Epstein. I am a trans woman. And I'd just like to say that obviously in the wake of the countless bills of anti-transgender legislation, it means truly a lot to see people in positions of power actually, seeing us, recognizing we exist, and appreciating our existence. This proclamation, it means a lot to me, and I'm absolutely certain it means a lot to many, many other people. And I'd just like to say, mainly on behalf of myself, but I suppose on the behalf of United Action for Youth, thank you. And please, please never stop seeing us.
Thank you. I will tell you that this proclamation meant a lot for this council to be able to present in this community at such a time as this. So we will say that you are loved and you are seen, and we'll continue to be a beacon voice in unity with you all. All right, we will go on to our consent agenda, which is items number 3 through 8. Can I get a motion to approve, please?
So moved, Taylor.
Second, done.
All right, moved by Taylor, seconded by Dunn. Anyone in the public like to address this topic? If so, please come forth. Seeing no one in person or online. Roll call, please. Oh, council discussion. Roll call, please.
Thomas?
Yes.
Alter?
Yes.
Burgess?
Yes.
Dunn?
Yes.
Harmson?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Teague?
Yes. Motion passes 7-0. Could I get motion to accept correspondence for items 7A and 7C?
So moved, Alter.
Second, Burgess.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. We're at item number 9, which is community comments. This is an opportunity for those in the community that want to speak on any topic that is not on our agenda. And there are sign-in sheets at the back, or you can sign in up front, and we'll welcome you at this time. You have a 3-minute limit. Welcome.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Brandon Ross, and I apologize for blowing up last time. And I promise not to raise my voice tonight.
We're happy to see you.
It took me about 20 years since I last did that in council, so I'm not going to scream at you. So thank you so much. I'm grateful that that you are here and that you did pay attention. I apologize to some people online, and I appreciate all that you're doing. With that, I would like to say that I'm for democracy and for everybody's rights. I'm anti-fascist, and very much so. I would like to say that in lieu that I disagree with a signage that says that Iowa City stands with Ukraine, and being of Ukrainian descent myself, I have to say that whenever you see that, it's not really telling the story of who is Ukraine. In 2014, there was a violent coup that made our January 6th moment look like a picnic. Over 200 people were killed in Ukraine, and over 200 were injured. The government was chased out. This was a right-wing nationalist group, which included fascist groups Svoboda, Right Sector, and Azov. They took over the government and chased out the democratically elected president, Viktor Yanukovych, and then they installed a rogue president who was Poroshenko. They same groups then began attacking Donbass, starting with a massacre which killed 47 people, Mariupol. This went on increasingly for 8 years, and in late 2021, it even got worse. Funding these people and giving weapons was the U.S. government, which included not only some from Barack Obama, more so from Donald Trump, who funded these same people, and then right now Biden, all the way up until Russia intervened or engaged or whatever you want to call it, invaded. This was going on along Russia's border and along Mariupol's Donbass's border. And 16,000 people died in those 8 years. This war is 9 years old, not 1. Okay. I support people of Ukraine, but I do not support the fascist right-wing nationalists that took over the government. I support democracy. I do not support the overthrow of the government. I do not support the U.S. supporting of the overthrow of that government, which they did. I do not support the arming of that government, which the U.S. did for 8 years until Russia came in. And it's important to know these things, to know that when you say I support Ukraine, you're only supporting, if you're supporting the government, only a minority of people who have taken over. Please call for peace and negotiations from your leaders.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Anyone else like to address a topic that is not on our council agenda? Welcome.
Hi there.
Yes.
Amy Kretkowski.
You.
That's just like it's written. Sorry. Kretkowski. I'm not going to take the heat for it. It's my husband's name, not mine.
What city are you from?
I'm from Iowa City.
Welcome.
And I'm here to, I heard some of the work session, not all of it. And so I'll address just the stuff that I heard. Thank you very much for taking a look at the memo that I sent. Hopefully you'll get a chance to not just look at the cover sheet, but also the broader memo that was provided in advance of the Parks and Rec Commission meeting that didn't happen. So maybe you take a look at that. But thank you for taking a look at that. The one thing that I heard said was that that the request for qualifications covers many of the issues that I pointed out in the memo. And I think the first point was that hiring someone with an engineering degree to be the consultant would take care of that. I would disagree with that. I don't think that hiring someone with an engineering degree is the same thing as hiring a structural engineer to do a full, complete evaluation to figure out what's wrong with the pool. Also, there was a point made about I said, why are we focusing on non-pool users? My point was not that we shouldn't focus on non-pool users, but it seems to me that the RFQ is emphasizing non-pool users over pool users. That was really the point. I've gone through the raw survey response materials, and I would encourage all of you to do the same, to go through that raw information, because I couldn't find, and if you can tell me where it is in there that people are saying that they're not comfortable getting into that pool, I'd like to see that, because I could not find that in the raw survey responses. I do believe that any new design process needs to have broad public input, and that it shouldn't be done just with these limited focus groups and the material that was in the master plan. About the pool not being ADA compliant, I would encourage you to look at the audit that was completed in 2018, and I will send you, if you don't have it, I'll send you copies of that. What is not ADA compliant, really not ADA compliant, is all the stuff leading up to the pool, the restrooms and the walkways. That's what's not ADA compliant. There are some things that I'm sure now, since this was done, are not ADA compliant, but that's not the focus of the ADA audit. Finally, having the current design be one of the proposed designs is not limiting. Ask the consultant to come up with 4 designs, 5 designs.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to address a topic that is not on our agenda? Welcome.
Hello, my name is John Downer. I'm a longtime Iowa City resident, and I'd like to follow up what Amy was saying about the configuration of City Park Pool. It's ideal for swimmers, for water polo players, for a lot of kids. That design, the footprint does not need to change. Okay, it can be modified, and I'm in favor of repair as opposed to replacement. Thank you.
Thank you. You want to leave your name in that basket? Thank you. Anyone else like to address a topic that is not on our agenda? Seeing no one in person or online, we're going to move on to item number 10, which is 10A, rezoning North Dodge Street and North Scott Boulevard. Ordinance conditionally rezoning approximately 3.87 acres of property located north of the North Dodge Street and North Scott Boulevard intersection from commercial office zone to community commercial zone with a planned development overlay for approximately 2.0 acres 2.04 acres, and to low-density multiple family residential with a planned development overlay for approximately 1.83 acres. And this is a motion to pass and adopt. Can I get a motion, please?
So moved, Thomas.
Question, point of procedure. Is this, am I looking at the wrong thing, or are we looking at setting a public hearing?
No.
No.
Pardon me.
Yep. So moved by Thomas,
Second.
seconded by Alter. Anyone like to address this topic from the public? Seeing no one in person or online, council discussion. Roll call, please.
Alter,
Yes.
Burgess,
Yes.
Dunn,
Yes.
Harmson,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Teague,
Yes.
Thomas.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Item 11, A is Mercer Park Aquatic Center and Scallion Gym exterior accessibility and lighting improvements. I'm going to open the public hearing, and we're going to start with comments from Ben Clark. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So our project has 3 objectives here. One is to replace a bunch of old pavement and then improve accessibility, and then also replace the original lighting to the exterior of the building. Here's a picture showing some of the pavement in front of the building. It's kind of past its useful life here. The sidewalk entrance to the building heaves a lot in the wintertime. It's a trip hazard. We've had a number of calls about that. We've got some damaged pavement around the outside of the building. Excuse me. In front of the building, there are some deficiencies with ADA parking. Sorry here. No van accessible spaces. The signs aren't quite up to code. We've got curb ramps, and then also grades are a little bit too steep in some places. For lighting, we're going to replace these 2 pole lights with an LED fixture. We'll replace some of the canned lighting around the building with a bollard-style LED fixture. Got quite a bit of energy savings with these LED fixtures. And then the way we're going to bid the project is we'll have a base bid that includes all of the pavement in front, and with that, that'll allow us to change some of the grades to make them ADA compliant. And then if budget allows, we'll do additional paving in the parking lot, and then we have a second alternate for the sidewalk around the exterior of the building. So the schedule will be to take bids in April. It'll be in front of you towards the end of April to award the project. Construction can start as early as May. It'll be done towards the end of September. And then we're going to have a few different phases to try to keep the entrance of the building open as much as possible. There will be a 2-week shutdown, and we'll try to coordinate that with maintenance to the pool. So the estimate's $305,000. We've got a alternate one would be 12, and then 39 for alternate 2. So with that, do I have any questions?
What accounts for those 3, the very last slide that you had of the bid of the estimate, and then the 2 alternates were significantly lower. I'm assuming that means certain pieces would be taken out.
Yeah, so the area in front, this is the base bid. So that's the work that needs to be done to sort of adjust the grades in front of the building. And so that would be our base base amount of work. And then the first alternate is just fixing some stalls down in the parking lot.
Okay.
And so if we're not able to award those within our budget, we can always come back and do that as a separate project. And that would be the same with the second alternate, is the sidewalk around the back of the building.
Thank you.
You could think of alternates as add-ons to the project if budget allows. So not central to the core of the project, but if we get good bids, we'll do a little extra.
Just as far as the timing of this happening this year, is there any consideration relating to potential changes of the footprint of this Mercer Scanlon facility?
Are you talking about maybe a proposed building addition in
Yeah.
front? Yeah, if that were to happen, it really wouldn't, this would still need to happen in order to change the grades for entrance to the building. They might take out a little bit of the new pavement, but I don't see it happening too much.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions for Ben? Thank you. Anyone from the public like to address this topic? Please come forward at this time. Seeing no one in person or online, I'm going to close the public hearing. Could I get a motion to approve, please?
So moved, Harmson.
Second, Alter.
Council discussion?
Well, this is in my neighborhood. I step out my front door and I see this facade, and I'm very excited to see more improvements, increases to accessibility. And I think everyone here would say about the same, but this is very close to my heart. So thank you for staff and working for this. And I hope we're able to get some good bids and get the rest of the projects taken care of.
Quick question, will this coincide with any of the other work that I think we're looking at for Mercer, like the tennis courts, pickleball, baseball?
Separate projects.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Burgess,
Yes.
Dunn,
Yes.
Harmson,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Teague,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Alter.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. 11C, 700,000 general obligation bonds. Resolution instituting
You missed 11B.
Okay. Sorry about that. I did. We're going to take a step back and go to item number 11B. All right, so this is $7,610,000 of general obligation bonds. Resolution instituting proceedings to take additional action for the issuance of not to exceed $7,610,000 general obligation bonds of the City of Iowa City, State of Iowa. And I'm going to open the public hearing. And welcome to our Finance Director.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So I'm actually going to be covering items 11B through 11F, which will cover the entire bond issue, which is about $9.7 million. It's made up of the $7.6 million of essential purpose and then three $700,000 issues of general purpose bonds. So last council meeting, the bond hearing was set. We're here on March 21st for the 4 public hearings on the bond, and then also the pre-levy authorization resolution. On April 11th, we'll be holding our rating call with Moody's. On April 18th, we'll come back with resolutions to direct the advertisement of the sale and to approve our official statement. May 2nd is when we'll receive and open bids. May 16th, we'll be back again with another resolution authorizing the issuance of these bonds. And then on June 1st, the sale of the bonds will close. This particular issue covers a lot of different projects. That's the entire list of what we're funding with GO bonds this issue. As you can see, the largest of that is the Gilbert Street Bridge, and then also the fire apparatus, which I believe is replacing 3 different fire trucks. So we also have a few parks and some of the recreation improvements and some improvements to some of the fire stations. So this is included as part of the 2023 amended budget and the 5-year capital improvement plan. It's incorporated into our current and future tax levy projections. And as it always is, it's sold in a competitive bidding process. As I stated earlier, this presentation will cover all items 11B to 11F. Any questions?
Nicole, in your memo, you mentioned a reverse referendum for the $700,000 bonds. Can you just explain what that is?
I'm not sure that I can because I'm not sure that it's ever happened. I believe if enough people petition, then it could have to go to vote.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Nicole? All right. Anyone from the public like to address this topic? Seeing no one in person or online, I'm going to close the public hearing. Can I get a motion to approve, please?
So moved, Thomas.
Second.
Second, Burgess.
Moved by Thomas, seconded by Burgess. Council discussion. Roll call, please.
Dunn,
Yes.
Harmson,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Teague,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Alter,
Yes.
Burgess.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Item 11C is $700,000 general obligation bonds, resolution instituting proceedings to take additional action for the issuance of not to exceed $700,000 general obligation bonds of the City of Iowa City, State of Iowa. I'm going to open the public hearing. And anyone from the public like to address this topic? Seeing no one online or in person, I'm going to close the public hearing. Can I get a motion to approve, please?
So moved, Alter.
Second, Burgess.
All right. Council discussion. Roll call, please.
Harmson,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Teague,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Alter,
Yes.
Burgess,
Yes.
Dunn.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Item number 11D is $700,000 general obligation bonds, resolution instituting proceedings to take additional action for the issuance of not to exceed $700,000 general obligation bonds of the City of Iowa City, State of Iowa. I'm going to open up the public hearing. Anyone from the public like to address this topic? Seeing no one in person or online, I'm going to close the public hearing. Could I get a motion to approve, please?
So moved, Burgess.
Second, Harmson.
Council discussion. Roll call, please.
Taylor,
Yes.
Teague,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Alter,
Yes.
Burgess,
Yes.
Dunn,
Yes.
Harmson.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Item 11E is $700,000 general obligation bonds, resolution instituting proceedings to take additional action for the issuance of not to exceed $700,000 general obligation bonds of the City of Iowa City, State of Iowa. I'm going to open up the public hearing. Anyone like to address this topic from the public? Seeing no one in person or online, I'm going to close the public hearing. Could I get a motion to approve, please?
So moved, Taylor.
Moved by Taylor, seconded by Dunn. Council discussion. So I guess since we're going through this really quickly, just for those that are paying attention, we're doing a lot of the same amount, $700,000 general obligation bonds, and that's because we couldn't put them all in one lump sum. The max is $700,000 general obligation bonds that we can do at one time. So I just wanted to make note of that.
For general corporate purposes, yes.
Yes.
And that's
So-
why the first one was for essential corporate purposes. where-
Yes. Yes. So for anyone that's tracking and trying to figure out what we're doing. All right. Roll call, please.
Teague,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Alter,
Yes.
Burgess,
Yes.
Dunn,
Yes.
Harmson,
Yes.
Taylor.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Item number 11F is 2023 Gold Bond Pre-Levy Authorization. This is a resolution authorizing the issuance of $9,710,000 general obligation bonds, Series 2023, and levying a tax for the payment thereof. Can I get a motion to approve, please?
So moved, Alter.
Second, Burgess.
All right. Anyone from the public like to address this topic? Seeing no one in person or online, council discussion. Roll call, please.
Thomas,
Yes.
Alter,
Yes.
Burgess,
Yes.
Dunn,
Yes.
Harmson,
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Teague?
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Item 11G is ARPA Nonprofit Capital Grant, preliminary funding recommendations. Can I get a motion to approve, please?
So moved. Done.
Second, Alter.
All right. Did I read the first part of that? I wouldn't even know. Okay.
I read the item title, but not the resolution approving.
Yeah, that's what So I'll just read the resolution. The resolution approving preliminary funding recommendations under the American Rescue Plan Act funded nonprofit capacity building capital grant program. And it was moved by
Dunn and seconded by Alter.
Great. All right. And we're going to welcome Rachel Kilberg, our Assistant City Manager.
Hi, everyone. I'll just provide some brief background and then talk a little bit about the item before you. So back in December, under your direction, city staff launched this nonprofit capacity building capital grant program. And if you refer back to that update memo that Cassie presented at the work session, that was one of your initial spending priorities that you established for ARPA funds. So $3 million was allocated to the program. The purpose was to fund transformative capital projects that would ultimately help an agency increase their capacity to serve the community. Just due to kind of the complexity and length of time it takes for capital projects to take place, this program followed a little bit of a modified application process. So we first issued a request for statements of interest. We received 8 letters of interest from different agencies in the community, and then a review committee consisting of myself, some staff from NDS, and 2 council representatives, which was Mayor Pro Tem and Councilor Burgess, reviewed those applications and then determined to invite a subset of those in for kind of an informational project interview. So those interviews were conducted, and then that review committee agreed upon these 2 preliminary funding recommendations before you. So the first would be a $1 million award to Free Medical Clinic. In short, that adds about 7 to 8 additional clinic specialty care clinic spaces, makes some ADA accessibility improvements, and then builds out some dedicated dental operatory space to enable them to expand that service. Free Medical Clinic's original request was actually less than that, but after we, the review committee, interviewed them about the project, we believed that their request was insufficient to really meet what that current demand was and would lead to capacity building. So the clinic reported that there was a 3-month waiting list for chronic care and a 1-year waiting list for dental services. They anticipate that when some temporary pandemic-related expansions to the Medicaid program end, I think here this spring, that will likely increase that demand. And they've kind of done some surveying of the community as they've gone through their strategic plan and have found there's kind of a perception out there that you can't get into Free Medical Clinic due to those waiting lists. So that's the first preliminary funding recommendation, and then the second would fund $2 million to neighborhood centers of Johnson County, and this would seed a capital campaign to enable them to acquire and renovate a new community center in a targeted neighborhood located where they serve families. So the project would add at least 50 early childhood education childcare slots, some youth after-school programming classrooms, a computer lab, some multi-purpose family meeting rooms, a kitchen, and then space for some of those satellite community services to come in, a library, a food bank, other social service agencies in the community. So this financing model will allow what they originally proposed would allow them to kind of phase scope the project depending on the outcomes of their capital campaign. They originally requested a $3 million reward, but as the review committee was kind of weighing all our options, we ultimately recommended a $2 million award just in order to be able to fund kind of 2 transformational projects, and believing that that $2 million seed fund was still significant towards their capital campaign goals. So the resolution before you would kind of signal approval of these preliminary funding recommendations, and then that would authorize staff to go back to both of these agencies, flesh out kind of a full proposal, develop those ARPA grant agreements, and then that would come back before you for final approval, probably separately. Happy to take any other questions or.
Hearing none, thank you. Anyone from the public like to discuss this topic? Please come forth now. Seeing no one online or in person, council discussion.
Well, these are, I think, certainly two transformational projects. I'm really thrilled with them. I think, as you know, I'm very keen on the idea of neighborhood centers. Now, this is neighborhood centers of Johnson County. It's sort of a subset of this more general concept that I'm very strongly supportive of, and that is the idea of having places within our neighborhoods that serve as centers. And this certainly is a wonderful expression of it. Hearing the program, it's really a very impressive array of activities that are associated with this particular project. So it's really great to see. I hope that, in my mind, these sorts of projects may be models for future such centers once we have an idea of how they operate and function and cost and their value. So I'm very, very supportive of this item.
I think just speaking for myself, but also for my better half, who is the other kind of doctor in the house, providing and supporting free medical care is so important, especially in our society that has a for-profit medical system for many people that leaves so many people out in the cold and without the care they need. And so increasing the capacity for both what we think of traditionally as medical care and then kind of breaking out the dental care part of it, which is incredibly important. It should be part of health care. I don't know how people, it's kind of weird that we don't think of those as one kind of, kind of in the same category or bucket. So it's good that we're able to use this money for those kinds of things. It's just so important to help people in our community to have access to the kinds of transformational health care. Being healthy, if you don't have your health, you don't have anything, right? Mm-hmm. Kind of an old saying. And so, and thank you to the people who do that work day in and day out at the free medical clinic.
I echo Councilor Hermson's comments. If you've never been or toured the free medical clinic, I would encourage you to do so. It's just an amazing facility, and this can only help improve that. Expanding their services is amazing, and as a healthcare professional, that is important to me to know that there is a service in our community that can help to provide healthcare to the citizens that can't always make it or don't have insurance for the big institution in this community.
I'm happy to support these two agencies. I think the Neighborhood Centers of Johnson County has proven within the community how they can really reach out to a diverse population, which is within our city. And then the free medical clinic, I have to say I'm excited about this, one, because when I first came to Iowa City, I had to get my wisdom, I had some tooth pain, had to get my wisdom tooth pulled. And it was Dr. Parrott that actually did pull my wisdom tooth. And so just in thinking about what he's contributed, this is a way to really even honor some of the work that people have done. So I was super excited to do this.
I'll just very briefly speak to the process of the selection. Thank you, Rachel, for your summary of that. But I really just want to emphasize that, having been involved in other, selection processes and groups like that, really commend Rachel's leadership on this and the level of organization and care that went into both soliciting the statements of interest and then kind of working with applicants to flesh out, what they could be bringing folks in for interviews, and I think empowering those of us on council who got to participate with really robust sort of way to consider the factors and to come to consensus. So it was just a really excellent process and makes me proud that we took that level of care for allocating these funds. The other thing I would say is just encourage you to look at the other projects that were submitted too. I think this process of dream big and tell us what you could do with $1 to $3 million really surfaced some amazing ideas. And I think, certainly with
the way that just the last few years and how we've been thinking about transitions and change and resilience and things that need to happen in our community made me really excited and hopeful for the future that our nonprofit agencies are thinking so strategically and towards the future. So I hope we can help find more resources.
I'll make my comments brief. I think I'm going to look at this a little bit different. I want to emphasize to folks in the community that this is an investment that's going to absolutely return on its dollar amount, right? Every dollar that we put into preventative medicine or poverty reduction programs is going to reduce the amount of taxpayer dollars, whether it's from the state, local, federal government, that are spent on emergency care, which is often much more expensive. As a poverty reduction thing, making it so that already limited income folks don't have to spend their limited income to survive, I see no other option than to vote for this. This is good policy, and thank you for the staff that prepared this, and thank you to the incredible folks in our community that work to make these programs possible.
I just want to echo what Councilor Burgess said primarily. First of all, Rachel, thank you so very much, and to all staff who worked so hard to put this together, and also who kind of conceptualized, not just like, well, let's do a standard RFP, but really to say, let's invite people to say what can be transformative, what can be visionary, and we got back even and especially projects that we didn't fund. I think that these are seeds for what we can do, and when I say we, I mean the city supporting the efforts of others over time, but really, we just got some amazingly visionary projects that took that sort of suggestion of think big and run with it, what could happen. And I have a lot of confidence that that kind of spirit and that now that those collaborations and that kind of thinking has started, it's not going to get stuffed back into a closet somewhere. So I just want to say it was a really amazing group to work with, and just thanks again for everybody who was involved in it. And yeah, I mean, I echo what everyone else said. These are going to be incredibly important projects for the community.
Roll call, please.
Alter,
Yes.
Burgess,
Yes.
Dunn,
Absolutely.
Harmson,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Teague,
Yes.
Thomas.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Item number 11H, fiscal year 23 racial equity and social justice grant allocations. This is a resolution adopting the racial equity and social justice grant allocations for fiscal year 2023. There was a request to defer this until our April 4th, 2023 meeting. Could I get a motion to defer, please?
So moved, Burgess.
Second, Alter.
And roll call, please.
Burgess,
Yes.
Dunn,
Abstain.
Harmson,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Teague,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Alter.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0 with one abstention. All right, item number 12 is council appointments. 12A is Civil Service Commission. There is one vacancy to fill an unexpired term upon appointment through April 6, 2026. And council discussion. There are 3 applicants and no gender. I don't know if I actually know that.
Yeah,
there's one male and one female on the commission.
Yep, so no gender balance needed.
I would just throw out, after looking through those, I thought that Ashley Jennings jumped off as probably the best fit for this, at least from these applications, although they were all good applicants, of course.
They were. I know. If I read the applications correctly, she was the one of the 3 that had a preference for working on civil service, which I always, when you see someone who that's their preferred, appointment, I always give that some weight.
I can support Ashley as well.
And I, as I sometimes do when they're older applications, I gave this applicant a call to say, hey, you applied 10 and a half months ago. Are you still interested? And she said yes.
You're so responsible. That's awesome.
All right. So, can I get a motion to appoint Ashley Jennings to the Civil Service Commission?
So moved. Done.
Second, Burgess.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Announcement, item number 13, 13A is announcements of vacancies new. Senior Center Commission, one vacancy to fill an unexpired term upon appointment through December 31st. Applications must be received by 5 p.m. Tuesday, April 25th, 2023. Could I get a motion to accept correspondence?
So moved, Burgess.
Second, Taylor.
All right, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Item number 14 is an announcement of vacancies previous. 14, well, we're at 14A. Parks and Recreation Commission, one vacancy to fill an unexpired term upon appointment December 31st, 2024. Applications must be received by 5 p.m. Tuesday, April 11th, 2023. Historic Preservation Commission, East College Street, one vacancy to fill an unexpired term. Historic Preservation Commission, Jefferson Street, one vacancy to fill a 3-year term. Historic Preservation Commission, Woodland Avenue, one vacancy to fill an unexpired term. Vacancies will remain open until filled. We're at item number 15, City Council information.
I just have a cool thing that I can share. The other week, the student representatives from USG came down to the Capitol to lobby on a number of bills, and I got to take them up to the Dome, which was a great experience for them and myself. I would highly encourage counselors to reach out to them and learn more about the legislation that they're trying to advocate for. One piece of which, the checklist, was actually approved by the House. So hoping for passage in the Senate and a better outcome for our renters, especially students.
Great, great news. I will mention next Tuesday will be the South District Market ribbon cutting, and I believe it's at 4:30 p.m. So that'll be exciting.
I just want to give folks a formal heads up. I guess I've spoken with all of you except for Pauline and John. We're meeting later this week. That at the date of our budget public hearing, which is April 4th, that we just set this evening, I plan to be proposing an amendment to the allocation in the budget relating to the shift that I've been talking about for community safety, based on the open police officer positions that we have now and other opportunities that we have for enhancing neighborhoods and other ways to create safety in the community. So just wanted to make sure everyone had a heads up about that, and if you want to speak with me more about it at any point, please do.
I'll also make mention that this Friday at the Engler Theater, the Inside Out Reentry is having a fundraiser, their biggest fundraiser, and it's going to be called the Mystery Hour, and they have Jeff Hoden coming as their special guest. He's a comedian and a talk show host and from Springville, Missouri, so it should be pretty interesting.
And he's from Iowa City.
He is from Iowa City. Yeah.
So I have one other thing. If people are still interested in, advocacy and volunteerism for the Ukrainian cause, there is going to be a volunteer event at the Coralville Public Library in Meeting Room B, hosted by some Native Ukrainians as well as the Iowa International Center, to make trench candles to try to raise some funds for refugee services here in the United States and in Ukraine.
Any other items?
Also, that's going to happen on Wednesday the 29th, 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. Sorry. Critical details.
Great. We're going to move on to item number 16, report on items from city staff, city manager's office.
Nothing tonight, Mayor.
City attorney's office.
Nothing for me, thank you.
City clerk's office.
Nothing from us, thanks.
All right, item number 17, can I get a motion to adjourn from the formal meeting back to our work session?
So I'll move Taylor.
Second, Alter.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. We are back to our work session agenda. We left off on information packet March 16th, and so we'll continue whatever discussions the council wants to.
Well, if I could just reframe things real quick, what you're looking at with the RFQ is the consultant selection document. So this is the advertisement, that we put out seeking consultants to assist us. The scope of services, as we can best project right now, is outlined. That helps individual consultants determine whether this project would be a good fit, but ultimately they will apply. And you have to think of this as some consultants may be full service. They may have architects, engineers within the same entity. Oftentimes we'll get teams of consultants that will apply with a lead consultant. In this case, I would expect an architect probably to be a lead consultant, but they might have a engineering firm to assist them or an aquatic specialty firm to assist them. So again, this is just the advertisement to the consulting world. Eventually, staff will make a selection and bring that to you, and that'll go through the city attorney's office, and the exact scope of services will be outlined in that consultant agreement at that time.
Well, we were, at least as I recall, we left off on the question of the, I guess it fell under number 6 on the scope of services regarding the schematic design. Whether to include the existing condition as one of those options, or alternatives, I guess you might say. And as I was expressing when we were talking about it earlier tonight, I do think it, particularly given the history of the discussion on this, to include the existing footprint of the pool as one of those schematic design options. And as I also tried to emphasize, in my view, that's kind of a foundation for a schematic plan, meaning there could be modifications, additional features perhaps, that could be considered for that option, but it would start with the notion that the existing footprint would be essentially the existing footprint would be the foundation for any other considerations that might apply.
Jeff, I've got a quick question for you. Do you know or have any sort of idea about what kind of increase in cost to us and the taxpayers it would be to request 4 schematics? One including basically leaving this as it is now, and then also saying one that is, very much influenced off the current plan of the pool, any additions, anything that we need to do additional to that. I know that's a really hard thing to say.
Hard to say. I can give you an educated guess, but that's just what it is an educated guess. 5,000 to 10,000.
I personally think that's worth it.
It's what? I'm sorry.
I think it's worth it. Because we have had tremendous engagement over this process, and if we get to the point where we're already deciding that we're going to be rebuilding the pool entirely, I think that design should be required to be part of the process and required to be part of the focus group. We're not saying that, say the focus group chooses resoundingly a different proposal, that speaks for itself. So we're not requiring or tying our own hands in picking that design, but I really want to see what people have to say. In addition, if we were to design it and go against the current design or change it drastically, that goes directly against the resolution that was passed by the Historic Preservation Commission, which does kind of concern me in a way. So $5,000 to $10,000 to just add it, to drop in the bucket for the whole project?
I'd like to add just a couple of things because I want to. This is uncharted territory for the council to be weighing in on the RFP. On the RFQ, and we brought it to you for this reason so you could have this debate. But as you read it right now, it sounds like a scope that's written in stone. That we're going to go through these focus groups. We're going to develop these schematic designs. We're going to do this statistically valid survey. Sometimes staff will learn things through these consultant processes, right? We might go through 6 or 7 presentations from consultants that have designed and built dozens and dozens of these pools across the country, and they might suggest modifications to this. So I just want to caution you on getting too focused on this, the exact type of focus groups or the sequencing of focus groups and the survey. Staff is expressing our intent to the consulting world, but again, I think it's in everybody's best interest to be to remain flexible. Now, I don't have a concern if you want to add another schematic design and work within that footprint. That's great feedback. We can incorporate that, but when you talk about the focus groups needing to weigh in on specific designs, that's not exactly how we've laid it out here. It could end up that way, but we could also have a consultant that says, "Hey, we've done this amazing digital and social media engagement campaign on other pools. It's been really successful. Well, we didn't call for that here, but we might decide through that process that that will fit here." So for the public, for the council, because we don't do this very often, I just want to kind of let you know how staff views these as being somewhat flexible. But when it comes to developing schematic designs, if you want one that very closely resembles the existing, we can incorporate that into that. The question would be, do you want that as one as the 3, or do you want to move to 4 or an additional?
Before we get to that, I wanted to just follow up with a question, Jeff, that it sounds to me also that this is a process that these potentially those who are applying for it, they're also very familiar with this process. And so they're looking at this. This is essentially for them to understand parameters and what work has been done to see do they have the interest, but understanding that, they might say, we've got expertise that you didn't call out here, or we have that there's flexibility on both sides, that you're signaling as a city, this is what we've done, this is what we're interested in, but there's a sense from, if we're going to work together, that yes, you may have some additional things, that there's flexibility on both sides. Does that seem to capture it? So it's just a good caveat for all of us who are new to it to know that this is not just in lockstep.
You'll see that. You'll
Okay.
see the exact process laid out when you approve the consultant agreement. You're seeing what staff is envisioning that process to be, but we remain open in a project like this in case somebody has some valuable experience that they bring to the table and suggest slight modifications. You're not going to see anything drastically different, but you might see some slight modifications.
I guess my concern here is that potential developer or drafter is not going to go through, how long has this process been in order? Months, year, multiple years worth of public meetings and documents to understand the kind of public response that we've had in regard to this. So, at the very least, again, for me personally, the decision is up to council. I think that we should have some either guidance or explanation as to what public comment has been received for this regarding to the floor plan, so that when we hand them this document, when they read this thing, they're understanding that there is strong public support, in a manner of speaking, for the current design rather than necessarily setting one requirement, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'd push back a little bit. We would expect that a consultant that proposes to us has done their homework and understands that. And even, we have a section of additional resources which will include city council minutes and things like that. Staff would absolutely expect that a consultant wouldn't come into this process blind to those community discussions. So, yeah, that's something we try to tease out in that process.
I think it's important, too, I certainly would not be in favor of substituting one of the three designs with something that we are foisting upon, not foisting upon, but giving maybe a weight to a design. We're at the stage of the process where we want to, if we're going to spend money to hire somebody to come in with some ideas and we think that they've got some expertise, I feel like we're not getting the city's bang for the buck if we say, just give us two designs plus, go out there and copy and paste from what's already there. And I also worry a little bit if we say, well, we want to make sure and include this design, if we're not signaling that, hey, that's probably the one we're going to pick, so don't put your full effort into time and effort into these other three because we're probably not going to pick them anyway. It just feels like, and they're going to have the public input and to be able to come up with another round of public input that's going to lay into this. And I can't imagine that any of the people who are advocating for anything are going to just suddenly stop. Willing to bet that exactly. So I think some of these things will be self-solving, that maybe we don't need to issue an edict from the council on these exact parameters. That's just kind of maybe the problem doesn't exist as we think, or has been framed, because this is what the process will reveal. We have advocates who are going to advocate for various different things and are going to be a part of this process. And that's actually when we were discussing this last summer, one of the things we had said during our many discussions was, please keep advocating, please keep engaged with the process, and as we got to a design phase, because we weren't at a design phase last summer. So.
Yeah, I would just simply say that this is under scope of services, so if it does affect the number of alternatives as we're talking about, and so I think, and I certainly support the idea of having four if we want to maintain having three other than the existing, and Jeff gave a sort of a ballpark notion of what that might cost. It's a really pretty nominal cost, but I think it's just sort of provides for clarity, where we're starting with the scope. I would also mention another item on this, and again, maybe this is, I don't know if we need to change the language in this, but I am concerned with where the public participation, at least in terms of a kind of an in-person public meeting, begins. And it seems to me, and this in part is based on my own professional experience working on public recreational facilities, and that is that at the beginning of the project, having an opportunity for the community to meet as a general public rather than breaking down into the focus groups, I think would be a useful element, in that it would, first of all, provide an opportunity for those who are participating in the focus groups to hear from other focus group members or just different points of view on the question of the city park pool. I understand the notion of focus groups, but I think it's important to also try to provide a forum in which people can hear from one another, so that you do get multiple perspectives, and you can hear back. You may be coming in as, say, the child care provider, and you have your own particular understanding of the pool, and you hear from another pass holder who regularly attends as a family, and to try to, through this process, the community itself begins to better understand the complexity and diversity of users who use City Park Pool. So you're not simply approaching this from within your own focus group as we've defined it. And that's the way we would do our work in San Francisco. We would have a series of meetings, actually. At the very beginning, the city would then provide a kind of a preliminary concept based on what was heard, receive public comment, and then come back again sort of with a final preliminary plan based on the comments received at the second meeting. I'm not suggesting that, but it does seem to me we would benefit from having right at the beginning an opportunity for the public to kind of weigh in without the constraint of being representative of a particular user group. So I'll just.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think we've had that process to get us to this point when we were going through everything relating to how did we determine that either the repair or renovation of the City Park pool would be a thing that we're now proceeding to this point. I mean, I know we all heard a tremendous amount of input and the phase 1 and phase 2 of that process to get to that being a part of the plan. And if you'll recall, there was that very preliminary kind of drawing, right, that sparked a whole lot of that input. So I feel pretty good about the level of input that we've gotten based on that idea, right? What if this was what City Park were to look like, generated a ton of feedback and has informed us getting to this point here. So I feel good that we have met that and, are now at the point where we can move forward with the idea of, okay, we have all of that input, which is not going away, both what existed and continued advocacy. And so next steps so that we can get to the point of actually having a project that's completed, whatever the scope of that, we decide will be, can continue to move forward.
So it seemed like there's a lot of discussion and different viewpoints on, how do we move forward? I guess the question at hand is, are there going to be some edits in what we have in this document for the consults? As I see it, the number one thing under the scope of services is review of previous reports and public input. And then the fifth thing is, these focus groups. And so this is a, community of 74,000 people. And, there will be people coming to represent from their vantage point. I do like the focus groups to be separate, although I do understand your point as, bringing people together to hear what other people think. It does make a difference in, I wasn't aware, that this is important to you. But I think at this point, I feel comfortable with this moving forward. Again, the review of previous public input is going to happen. There'll be opportunities for continued input from people in the community. And that's, kind of bullet number 5. And then number 6 is where the development of these, 3 designs come forth. And so I feel comfortable at this level starting here. And but I do hear the concerns of those in the community. So I don't know. If I was doing my counts, because that's a part of my job, is to do the counts of what do I hear. And I think I heard, and I'll just say names, Hermsen, Alter, Burgess, and myself say, at this point, let's move forward with what's here, and then with no edits is what I think I heard. And maybe people can confirm that.
I confirm it because I do think that, that's why I actually asked my follow-up question about the understanding from that this is not, again, it's not written in stone as to this is the exact, thou shalt do this. It is recognizing the needs from the city, and as you say, it's a perfect winnowing experience, If somebody comes in and is like, here, I'm just going to give you Wally World, right? Well, then they did not do their homework. And then likewise, I think that John, I think you raised some really interesting points about the focus groups and the way in which they could happen. I just don't think that in the scope of services in this, essentially, as you said, an advertisement for qualified people to come in, that we need to be that granular at this moment. This is sort of, here's who we want to make sure we hear from, and here's a way in which we can understand it because we are 74,000 people. However, there's wiggle room in there too, right? There might be that we do an open house. We're doing it for the underestimated businesses. Maybe there's an open house for this. I don't know, but I don't know that we need to have that written here, because if we end up finding out that we can't account for everything in advance of finding out who we're going to work with. So this is why I'm okay with it as well. And so I take your point as well, Sean, about wanting to see, all right, what's your game? How well can you absorb what this community wants with its myriad populations and desires? What's your best? And then the community can respond to that. And so that's where I'm at.
Okay. Unless there is any more comments or change of majority at this point to change this document, I want to hear it now, or else we're going to move on to the next item.
Well, I would just say finally that, one takeaway I took from the master plan phase was there was the sense that the public wasn't heard. And so that's one reason why, I've suggested those two items. If we do not improve on both the public feeling heard and the question of whether to consider leaving the pool essentially as it is, whether it's repaired or replaced, we will hear that, no doubt about it.
And we're going to hear it in step 5.
If we're talking scope, there is a cost implication. It's not significant, but
yeah. It will be heard in number 1, review of previous reports and public input, and number 5, through those focus groups. So it will be heard again.
Not to mention all of our meetings.
Yeah.
Which are public and where we hear from people.
Yeah, I mean,
and the meetings that we'll continue
yeah.
to have and the emails that we'll continue to receive. So.
And those voices are important, and I think it captures those voices to have opportunities in this document. So, all right. If nothing else on this item, anything else from the March 16th info packet? Hearing nothing else, we are adjourned from our work session. Oop.